I'm just waiting for the camera to start. Good. Okay, I'm sorry. Camera has started. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome y'all to Budget Work Session Day 3. Today is Monday, June 3rd, 2024. We are going to go ahead and get started. I will start off with the public charge. The Board of Commissioners asks its members and citizens to conduct themselves in a respectful and courteous manner, both with the board and fellow citizens. At any time, should any member of the board or any citizen fail to observe this public charge, the chair will ask the offending person to leave the meeting until the individual gains personal control. Should decorum fail to be restored, the chair will recess the meeting until such a time that a genuine commitment to the public charge is observed. We will also be doing a land acknowledgement. As we convene for the Durham County Commissioners meeting, it's crucial to recognize the painful truth of history. We stand in the stolen ancestral lands of the Catawba, Eno, Occaneechi, Shakori, and the Tuscarora peoples, whose deep connection to this land predates our arrival. We acknowledge with humility the unjust displacement and violence that occurred, leading to the disposition of indigenous peoples from their homelands. Their resilience in the face of such adversity is a testament to their strength and their spirit. May we humbly honor the ancestors and elders of those nations, both past and present, by committing ourselves to fostering understanding, healing, and justice for all who inhabit this land. Let us walk forward together with open hearts, acknowledging the past and embracing a future guided by compassion, respect, and unity. With that being said, I did want to let everyone know that I do have a family emergency. It's kind of been going on for a little while. I'm going to stay here as long as I can in the ignorant attempt that truth will at some point prevail throughout these proceedings. I did reach out to Commissioner Carter and gave her the right of first refusal about running the meeting, so she is thankfully obliged. We will go ahead and get started. Our first presentation that is slated to run for 90 minutes is Durham Public Schools Discussion Budget. Our chair has, our clerk has uploaded the presentation, and we can proceed with our speakers. Not unless the manager has anything else to add. All right, thank you, ma'am. Welcome, Superintendent Moore.
Is it on? Okay. Good afternoon, Vice Chair, Commissioners, Manager. Happy to be here today. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. I think I can advance. Can I advance? Oh, whoops. Did I do that or did you do that? Okay, all right. I always start with desired outcomes, what I hope that we will get out of the presentation today. I will say that in the folders that you have, you should all have a green folder. You have a copy of this presentation. You have a copy of some FAQ that was sent out Friday afternoon and some responses. Some of those responses are on the paper, and some of those responses required attachments that are all in the folder as well. But I will focus on the presentation in terms of what we will be doing today. Our intent today would be to provide you an overview of some district highlights, some current and future fiscal measures to reduce local expenditures, kind of like JB last week. We got the memo as well. So we'll be talking about some of those things that we are doing in the district. And then we'll get into the 24-25 board proposed budget request, and we'll close out with some deferred needs that we'll want to talk about, and then certainly give you an opportunity to ask questions as we move forward. Some district highlights, and I'll spend a little bit of time and talk a little bit about some of these beyond what's on the screen. For the 22-23 school year, 88.2% of Durham Public Schools met or exceeded growth goals. It's almost 90% of the schools meeting or exceeding growth. That is remarkable as we have come out of the pandemic for that percentage to be that high for the schools in the district. As a subset of that, 20 schools, which is more than a third, are ranked in the top 20% of North Carolina schools for academic growth. That is also remarkable for that many schools from one district to be in the top 20%. And that leads to the third bullet. Early this year, I believe it was in January, the New York Times featured Durham Public Schools in an article that really touted the district's pandemic recovery. One of the things that's being tracked across this country is how well school systems are back to pre-pandemic levels with regards to academic outcomes for students. And what districts are finding is that those steps back and steps forward are happening, but it is really remarkable that in Durham we have achieved pre-pandemic levels. Still a lot of work to be done, but that is a remarkable achievement in the face of how hard that has been for districts across this nation. Recently, we received some accolades from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction as DPS was named an AIG Promising District. What's important about this metric is that it recognizes that historically the practices for identifying students for academically, intellectually gifted services in the state has faced some scrutiny with regards to not resulting in equitable outcomes for students of all colors and backgrounds, and that all students have gifts that are to be and talents that are to be nurtured, and that the manner in which a district identifies students for AIG services can help reverse the course of what has been seen historically in the past. And so Durham Public Schools is being recognized for the alternative pathways to AIG identification. We recently also had 10 schools that were recognized by Magnet Schools of America as schools of excellence or schools of distinction. This is also important. It's the largest number that have been recognized, certainly, as Durham grows its magnet population as a part of the Growing Together initiative. And then you heard about this one last week. Duke Health, Durham Tech, and DPS received an almost $30 million, it's 29.5, grant to open a new early college focused on health careers. What's particularly impactful about this piece of data is there's only one other program in the state of North Carolina that actually has 3 partners with an early college. Most early college partnerships are between the community college, the university, and the local school system. The third partner here, Duke Health, is what makes this remarkable and a standout. That is not common. It is, I think, the second program in the state that does that. And then on a real specific note, Pearson Town Elementary School principal Asia Cunningham was the recipient of the coveted Milken Educator Award, otherwise known as the Oscars of Teaching. This is not an award for which you can be nominated or that you seek out. This is an award that the Milken Foundation searches people nationwide to award and recognize. It comes with a $25,000 unrestricted cash gift to the recipient. So, Oscars of Teaching for sure. And then in reverse order from what I did in the joint meeting, I want to start with some of the fiscal measures because there are a couple of additions to this. So there are some things, Durham Public Schools finds itself needing to really scrutinize, and as they should, our local budget in particular and all of our resources as a result of the missteps and the miscalculations that happened in the past year with regards to the classified salary study. The shortfall that was identified and the steps that had to be taken hurt people. And I have to acknowledge that. And as I came in as interim, it has been a priority to understand where all of our resources are and really examine how we need to marshal them and best utilize them moving forward. So a couple of things that have happened. We have had some positions allocated to schools, classroom teachers and assistant principals over the years that were beyond the formulas that are allocated by the state for this. And that's okay to do so long as you're doing it within an established budget and you have the local dollars to do that. So what we have done is we've eliminated the flexibility of additional positions beyond what's already established in the base budget. There have been times when, after the school year began, after the base budget was established, requests have been made for needs. And for right now, anyway, we are sticking with what's in the base budget to make sure that we have certainty that the funds are available. We have also eliminated the flexibility of some conversion from allotment categories, meaning that in some cases, you will receive an allotment or a resource for a specific purpose, and a school has been allowed to change it to a different purpose. Sometimes those are more allowed than other times, and when they are not allowed through how our resources are marshaled and distributed to us from DPI, that costs us local dollars. We have to put those resources on local dollars. And so once again, in order to ensure that we are staying within the base budget that we have allocated for different categories, we are freezing conversions for the next school year. We are also having to do some tightening around hiring and payroll for teachers that have emergency licenses, permit to teach or EPP programs, residency license. These are teachers who come in not with the certification that is already in place. to have a teaching position. We know that because of the needs in the district, the pipeline not being great, alternative pathways to teaching are important for all districts, but there are periods of time and requirement that are bound within those alternative pathways, that you have a certain amount of time and steps that need to be taken in order to convert that emergency license or convert that permit to teach to an actual teaching certificate. And once we go beyond the life of the emergency permit or the permit to teach, if you're going to continue to pay those teachers a teacher's salary and the local supplement, that is hitting your local bucket because you cannot put them on state paid positions and take advantage of the positions that we are given by DPI. We've already eliminated, we did that earlier this year, eliminated out-of-state travel and reduced in-state travel to mission critical. That's already in place and it will continue into 24-25. We did freeze local expenditures for the remainder of 23-24, so whatever it is that you might want to spend needs to be approved by cabinet in order, in regardless of what it is, whether it's school-based or central-based, if it's out of local funds. We have implemented a review process for all non-school-based hiring so that positions at central services are sitting vacant for a period of time before they are hired, or if they are hired. And then this is a new bullet that has a figure on it that was not in place at the last presentation. We are looking at a minimum of a $6 million reduction to local non-personnel budgets for 24-25. That is for next year. That is about a 15% reduction in non-personnel budgets for 24-25. We are not looking to schools for those funds. We are doing that at the central services level, likely to impact supplies, materials, travel, maybe electronic subscriptions, contract dollars for different kinds of things in the district. And we're still we haven't fully identified where specifically, but we know that amount. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. You've seen this slide before. This is updated with all of what's in the board's proposed budget. I'll go through what's in each of the categories for a refresher. The green box at the top includes items that all districts have to implement that you don't really have a choice about. These are things that come from legislation. You'll see, for example, there's a certified salary increase that's built into the second year of the biennial budget, estimated at 5%. There's a classified salary increase estimated at 3%. That is based on the biennial budget. I will stop here for just a second to say that if the legislature increases beyond what is currently in the second year of their adopted budget, raises for teachers or classified staff, obviously these numbers would change. This is the cost, the local cost of salary increases and for classified and certified staff because the state takes care of those increases for state paid positions. And then the retirement, the FICA, and the health insurance changes. Those are all legislated that we don't have a choice about. The next couple of items are also about compensation. The first one is a teacher salary supplement increase. It increases the starting supplement by about $800. And then how much that actually is changes as you go through years of experience. That cost of that is estimated at $3.1 million. And then later addition to the teacher salary supplement increase was a specific additional supplement for difficult to staff positions. Right now, that number of $1.39 million is based on EC staff, ESL staff, and other EC associated staff that carry a caseload of students. And it is broken into two different pieces. $200 a month for 10 months for most of the staff impacted here. But for some of the EC staff that serve in self-contained classroom, alternative program that have our highest need students in small classes, it is $300 a month. That is proposed there. Yeah, and the total there is $4.5 million. There is also an item for master's pay. As you are aware, somewhere around 2011 or 12, the General Assembly removed master's pay moving forward for teachers who achieved a master's. If you had started your coursework and you finished it, you would be grandfathered. But anyone who started their master's after 2011 or 2012 is not eligible to receive master's pay. So we have calculated that based on the current number of teachers that have masters in the district that would be eligible for the master's pay, that would cost us a little over $1.2 million. And this number would change every year based on who in your district has a master's. And certainly if this were to be implemented, it might draw more teachers in that have masters and has implications in future years. The next item is the completion of the compensation study, the implementation that was started last year, that where the financially modeling did not actually project the actual number of funds that were needed. The funds were not available. The board implemented an increased classified schedules that basically ran from July through the end of February and then course corrected in March based on available dollars in the budget. The board did implement a $4.5 million fund from their fund balance was allocated to meet the payroll for those July through February salaries that were implemented. And that's when the change was made for March moving forward to be a flat 11% raise for all classified staff, because that's what was within budget for the remainder of the year. And that 11% represents the 4% that came from the legislature, and then an additional 7% that were funded by the $4.1 million allocation that was targeted out of last year's county commissioner local appropriation increase. Additional 1.5 that came from the board's fund balance that was part of the budget appropriation for this year. So all of that combined is where we ended up with for this year's salaries. And then in looking at what was needed to fully implement a classified compensation based on the schedules that Mr. Crutchfield, the comptroller that the board hired, came up with, we have determined that that's about an additional $8.8 million. That includes not just the salaries, but the retirement and the FICA increase. You have some questions about that, and there are some responses to that in the folders that include Mr. Crutchfield's schedules that show what the average raises look like across different categories. However, it's hard to zero in on a specific amount because it is still tied to how an individual is placed on that schedule based on their years of experience. But it shows you mins and maxes, and based on those mins and maxes, what the percent increase is. I will also say that the percent increase is at least 3% for everybody based on where they currently are, because 3% is what's already in the legislative biennial budget. So everyone will increase at least 3% from where they are now, but some categories will increase more than that based on what's in the schedules that have been proposed. And final schedules are not adopted until after the board understands their full landscape in terms of the budget that is allocated to them, which includes both any addition or increase that the county is able to provide and any changes that are made by the legislature in their budget as we move forward there. So all of that has to be taken into account before a final budget resolution and disposition can be decided by the board. And then because of the increased request of local dollars, there is an increased amount that would then pass through the district to the charter schools. $4.2 million would be the additional amount that would need to go to charters based on this budget request. It's basically 20% of the $21.2 million. There's also a request in here for additional pre-K classrooms. There are 3 classrooms scheduled to open at Murray-Massenburg Elementary School. The full cost of those 3 classrooms is $716,000. That amount will reduce by whatever the number of seats is that we are able to get from the Durham pre-K work. We've already been notified about, I believe it's 18 seats that they know for sure that they are offering, which would bring that cost down to around $500,000, maybe a little bit less. And then for capital funding, the commissioners already provide $6 million a year. We are asking for a recurring increase of $1.5 million. And this is actually an item that really needs to be around 4.5 to 6 million, but we felt like that we needed to stage that out over a multiple year ask. So you would likely see this in future years as if it rises to the level of a priority to continue to do that work in order to get to the level that's recommended for a yearly recurring budget for our capital funding needs, operations. This is just another version of the same amounts split out through what's in operating, splitting the pre-K funds out separately so you can see existing funds that are part of that, and then splitting the capital funds out, as I said to you, the $6 million that's already appropriated, the 1.5 that's being requested. Still the same bottom line, 27.7. There are some items that I do feel compelled to mention that are deferred needs that we discussed as a part of the budget development process, but did not make it into the final budget. You can obviously see that the final budget request is compensation heavy, as we've determined, and the board has moved forward with that being the priority need for the district. And within the compensation, I think the board has been pretty clear that completing the work of the compensation study is a priority for them. The technology refresh, in order to continue to refresh all of the laptops and devices that were doled out during the pandemic as we went to remote learning, that is about an $8 million cost. That is likely to come down because we are reevaluating right now, in particular, our K2 device deployment and whether or not that still needs to be one-to-one. We are currently one-to-one there, but we are evaluating whether or not that needs to continue in the early grades. We have some deferred needs around curriculum resources and subscriptions. It's about $2 million that we would request there. Some additional staff in some critical needs areas for $4 million. This would be counselors, social workers, restorative practices coordinators at the elementary school. The district has a focus and a priority on restorative practices in all of our schools that are required to engage in restorative practices to support students. There are positions allocated for a coordinator at the secondary level, middle and high, but there are not positions allocated at the elementary level for this need. And then the biggest chunk really is the operational needs that we have moving forward. Between HVAC and life cycle repairs and replacements, safety and security needs that are related to fire safety, and some equipment and repair needs related to successfully implementing CEP district-wide as we move forward. And that is around 25 to 30 million in all three of those areas. This is what I've been calling the money slide again, and happy to open it up for questions. That's the end of my formal presentation, but you have a lot of information in front of you and want to let it go now for you for questions.
Ladies, if you all do want to stop here as opposed to going on through the presentation, I would be more than happy to oblige. It is, of course, at the pleasure of the board. I know... Yeah, I'm looking at you. I know, are there any slides in particular that anybody wanted Superintendent Moore to go over before we proceeded into the Q&A portion? Yes. Oh, I'm looking at you. You got your hand up. Before we go into the formal
thank you so much for the information that's in the folder. I really appreciate it. Obviously, we will look at it later, but I appreciate it. And also, I appreciated the information about some of the things that you're implementing to control costs and to step up to the financial crisis that we're in right now. How will you turn the actions that you are taking now into actual policy moving forward?
So this is actually sort of embedded in some of the responses. There are a number of things that we have to sort of dust off, revise, update, or create in order to institutionalize some of these changes. We are updating the finance manual that we currently have in the district that's not been updated in a number of years to include some of these changes and codify some of them in the manual so that they are socialized and trained on across all districts. An extension of the update of the finance manual is a budget manager training that is being developed and will be rolled out to all school-based bookkeepers so that they have an understanding of the law, the policies that are in place, and in terms of how to effectively manage the budgets at the school level. That training will also be applied to anybody at central services who manages a budget. It will also be applied to every principal in the district. So those are the 3 priority areas to achieve budget manager training. I'm working with NC ASBO, the North Carolina School Business Officers Association, that has training modules available for bookkeepers and principals around this work. So we're working now on timing of doing that and when that can be done. The target for it is for that training to occur prior to the beginning of the next school year. The complete revision of the finance manual may not happen by the beginning of the school year, but it'll already be in progress. And then, so those are the pieces associated with sort of day-to-day finances. Another piece that is that I'm working on is again, a third-party consultant to help work with our human resources staff and our payroll staff to develop an allotment manual. And that is a manual that speaks specifically to the resources that we are allocated from the state, from our federal sources, and local sources, so that we can clearly see the formulas that guide the implementation of how resources are allocated to schools, so that you can also include within that manual what flexibility exists and where, and what the processes are to exercise that flexibility. And it is a manual that will be available to everyone to see, so that it is transparent to the public, to all of our schools, all of our stakeholders, so that they can see how we are using our resources. So those are some of the things that are in place that will move forward to help codify the things that you've seen already.
Well, thank you. I mean, what you just said is really critical because, and I know you're here as an interim, and I appreciate the work that you're leading, but the kind of challenges that we're facing, it's not just a one-off. This is the future.
Right.
And so we have to have the types of things that you're talking about institutionalized. Unfortunately, that we are looking at a future with less resources. So I appreciate that. Related to the budget itself and the decisions around compensation, just to clarify, where we are right now, and I'm trying to understand, like, what level are we at now? Are we at, are we basing the new, whether it's the certified or the classified increases, is it based on the criteria that existed before October of 2023 plus the 11%? What is the floor that we're at now, and what is the criteria or the policy that you are using right now moving forward for how compensation will be allocated?
So I'm going to assume that this is specifically about the classified compensation, but if it's not, I'll tag onto that. So I call it the Hill implementation because it was what was implemented between July 1 and end of February, which was, I think, voted on by the board in October or November, was not the Hill recommendation, but it was based on the Hill document, the Hill work, with a couple of changes. Namely, the Hill recommendation did not provide for everyone to be paid on their current years of service, but rather the recommendation was to be paid on state years of service. When the board voted to implement the Hill recommendations, but to implement it with actual years of service, that actually is part of what drove up the cost. And that's where the financial modeling didn't work in terms of what they thought that was going to cost and whether or not they could afford it. So the Hill implementation required that the board come back in January or early February and allocate $4.5 million of the board's fund balance in order to actually cover the salaries from that period of time. And then the decision that the board made in March, or actually they made it at the end of February, going into March, was to reset the classified schedules and to go back to 22-23, which we knew we had the base budget for, because that's what we had in 22-23, and then to add across the board to everyone an 11% raise. That 11% raise was what we calculated was within the existing 23-24 budget based on the 4% that it raised from the legislature, the $4.1 million that was allocated from the commissioner's local budget increase, the $1.5 that was requested as a part of the budget resolution from the fund balance of the board. So those amounts put together added to the base budget from 22-23, which went from 81 million to about 90 million. And so 90 million is the base budget for 23-24 that reflects 22-23 plus 11%. And that is the baseline that we are using for 24-25. So that baseline for 24-25 is just over $90 million. We were calculating into that what the 3% average will be based on the biennial budget. And then the $8.8 million that's requested for the compensation study is to implement the proposed salary schedules that Mr. Crutchfield has developed, which are largely, over 90% of those schedules have a starting min that is exactly the same as what the previous compensation study recommended. But how you get from year to year in terms of steps and what those increases look like did drop off some, because the previous salary study recommended 1.5% raises every year as you went up. This one is more like 1%. And so you didn't rise as quickly as you went through the years of service. And the schedules that Mr. Crutchfield has developed also do not exceed state maximums in categories, which in the previous compensation study, some of the job classifications, because of the 1.5% every year at the top of the scale, exceeded state maximums. So that's been fit within the mins and the maximums for the state for those positions. And that additional cost, as we marked it out through our existing amounts that were available and what it would cost to implement those schedules moving forward, once you include the other pieces like retirement and FICA, came to $8.8 million.
Okay, so you said that we're now starting at not a base of $90 million more.
$90 million total.
Okay, $90 million total, okay. And then, just trying to understand this, what has been done about the whole issue of using this way the state looks at experience versus the way Durham Public Schools? What is the policy that is going to be used?
Yep. So that's work that's happening right now. We presented to the board at the last work session or last meeting a draft of a salary administration policy. So that is still in discussion and before the board right now. There are some decisions that need to be made about once these schedules are adopted and people are placed on the schedules, what do raises and movement look like beyond that? And there are options for how to do that. You can build a schedule that looks like it has steps and has a % increase from one year to the next. Right now, those steps are assumed within the mins and maxes in the comptroller schedules. But right now, those steps are for placement. Where does a current staff person go? The board has indicated that where we place an existing DPS employee right now will be based on their years of experience. Not the state definition, but the Durham County, the way they've been doing it for years, so that no employee goes backwards, quite frankly. And they maintain their years of experience as they are currently being paid. But it is what happens after this implementation year that is part of what's in the salary administration policy? Do you build in the steps as a permanent feature of the salary schedules? And the assumption is that every year there's a 1% increase or whatever it is the board determines. Or do you instead provide language in a salary administration policy that reflects that we will be responsive to what the General Assembly does and intentional asks that may come before the commissioners and are potentially funded and adopted in a final budget resolution of the board for what that would look like. Employees prefer the first because it's built into the schedule. But building it into the schedule, if you were to do about a 1% raise year over year, which is what Durham has done in the past, it's give or take more or less depending on what job category you are in. But you can see at $90 million, 1% would be almost another $1 million. It's $900,000. It'll be more than that based on what gets applied here this coming year. So it's about another $1 million every year if all staff stay in place and move forward a year. But whether or not you actually need that $1 million to implement a 1% increase really depends on the in and outflows of staff. You have staff that retire, staff that leave, new staff that come in, and so you may be able to absorb that $1 million within the $90 million based on what happens with movement with staff. There's just no way to really know. So most newer salary administration type policies recommend not having steps and instead building in whatever ask is made as a part of the budget development process, so you know that this is what we're asking for, and if we get it, good. If we don't, then we don't, or what the legislature does. And so it's kind of like an and or. But that is less certain for staff because they don't necessarily see what that path forward looks like. So that is the policy that is being debated amongst the board right now in terms of where they land and where they move forward.
I guess I'm concerned that if you guys have not created a policy yet, but you're asking for this funding, what does that mean?
Yeah, this funding is to,
what is the basis for this request?
Yeah. The $8.8 million is to achieve salary schedules that are market rate responsive. That is what it will cost to implement the work that was done over the past year or two to raise classifications, different job category classifications to the market rate. And then beyond 24-25, that is what's in the salary administration policy. This sets the baseline. So this is the new baseline.
Mm-hmm. And does this right size some of the, and I'll stop after this.
No.
Does this right
help
size?
Help him now, because I ain't about to help him. You better go ahead and be nice. I ain't about to be.
Does this right size some of the kind of things that we heard about before, where some people got, disproportionate increases that were not necessarily market rate, that exceeded market rate?
Yes, it does.
Implementing this actually, will it address some of the actual inequities that were actually created before?
So when you look at the comptroller's schedules, those raises are between 3% and the high is like 17. Whereas when the Hill study was the recommendations they brought forth and then what the board implemented was from 4% to 40-some%. So, and that was based on, again, years of experience and that 1.5% per year. So this does right-size that, which is why some employees don't want it. It is not what their paycheck reflected from technically July to the end of February, but it is a minimum of the 3% that is coming from the legislature or higher depending on what's in the schedule. But the highest in the schedule I think I've seen is 17.
And do we have the controllers?
You do have
here?
those. You have those in there. Yes,
Okay.
You do.
All right. Thank you. And I'll stop. I have some more, but I'll wait.
No, you're good. And So that y'all can get all the warm and fuzzy, because I did tell folks beforehand that I had to leave because I had a family emergency. And honestly, I should have left before now. I really should have, but I have put this job ahead of family. And thank God November 25th, I don't have to do that no more. What I will say, a couple of things. I like how you put it, achieve salary schedule that is market rate responsive. I think across the board, that is what everybody in here wants. Commissioner, let me finish my visit. Commissioner Carter will continue the rest of the meeting. I saw some folks walk in, and they might be curious as to why I left. And it's about 5 of y'all that walked in who don't do nothing but lie on black people, so I want to make sure I told the truth again. All right, so Commissioner Carter will be the one backing it up. I want to throw something out there. I caught that nod that you said in the beginning. You said you saw J.B. Buxton do his presentation, and you say you got the note. I need you to understand, Superintendent Moore, this ain't got nothing to do with you. Woman to woman, if I see you on the street in 10 years, I need you to know it ain't got nothing to do with you. So I can appreciate you outlining the accolades of Durham Public Schools. The 5 women up here, Commissioner Chair Alam is not here. We don't need nobody to roll out the red carpet. Like, we do appreciate what our teachers do. We do appreciate what our principals do. We are in community with them whenever this group of people who surprisingly showed up today, decides to invite us to a ribbon cutting, if they decide to ask us for some money, if they decide to say, hey, we're doing this with some solar panels, there aren't we in the midst. Like, we try to show up because we want to. And I also, one accolade that's not up there, and quite frankly, again, because you only got here, we sitting here talking about these accolades, I just want to say big ups to Dr. Mubinga that was unceremoniously thrown out of this government. So I thank him for some of these accolades. I was there for Asia Cunningham when she got the Milken Award. This is the same black woman who was a principal that they tried to fire a couple of years ago because they said she didn't know what she was doing. But now she's award winning and got $25,000, and they wanted her from the outside. This is the same woman that's running a school that's going to have 219 more black kids at it. And I see parents coming up there every day or every other day up to the school board saying, we don't want those kids here because they don't learn like our kids learn. They don't know what Montessori is. They don't know what an IB program is. But the Growing Together got everybody in their feelings about it, because for once we're finally going to merge these schools. But they didn't want that black woman there. And as soon as she won, now they don't want black kids over there with the black woman. And I don't have a problem saying this because it's the truth, right? Like, that's not me picking on anybody. That's me saying it is what it is. When we had an issue at Durham School of the Arts, black parents came in there and said, this is how my child is treated. We had a black woman, Dr. Muhammad, to come in. You don't know this. That woman came in there. She went to ISS for 3 days with her child. Principal and the teachers never noticed her. She videoed it. Oh, I still got it. I'll be more than happy to email it to you. And she sat there and she cried with her son. That is not an indictment of DSA. That is an indictment of whatever person was running ISS that day. So don't go out and say Commissioner Burns was anti. The woman cried in her car because she sat in there. It's like 11 black kids in there. No teacher, no homework, no anything. Her son got in the car with her and he broke down crying. He said, Mama, this is how they treat us every day. And so when I get emails like that and I get videos like that, and this woman could just sit in ISS and nobody say anything, I send them to the school board members. And you know what I get? Might get a reply. Ain't never got a response about it. Ain't got a response about that other email that I sent to y'all that we're not going to talk about. And I say all that to say to the teachers in here, to the members of DAE who are in here, if the microwave over in this room right here, I love my staff, I'm about to talk about y'all. If I was to burn some popcorn in the microwave over here, these people would email and swear up and down they got asphyxiation, I can't come to work, Commissioner Burns is trying to kill us with popcorn. I believe that when people don't like the food at the jail, they email us. When people don't like the air that they breathe somewhere, they email us. So when those teachers came and stood up there the other day and they said to us, there is mold in my classroom, I'm like, this ain't the first time that this has come up. This cannot be the first time. When we had somebody to come to us the first year from DSA about the chillers that had not been repaired, but Wendell Davis had given them the money, and then we had to go into fund balance or go into one fund to go out and find the money to buy a brand new one. The very next year, we had, I won't say which elementary school it was because I don't want to get it wrong on camera. We had an elementary school that did not have a stove. And I was like, how in the world are y'all heating up food for these kids? They were heating them up in a warmer. So these little black, it was a majority black school, didn't have a stove. If they would have come to any of the 5 women sitting here, we'd have moved the money that day. If you would have told us that there was an issue with Mo, we would have moved it that day. And y'all sitting up here with a fund balance. You sitting up here with money from the 2016 bond. There were capital improvement dollars. I agree with my colleagues that there's some more money that can be put in the capital improvement dollars. And I'm willing to work on that. But what I can't understand is how this is me speaking, because I know only one of my board members has told me she don't agree with this. What I don't understand, I'm going to look at y'all, is how y'all allowed this thing to go on for this long and you ain't advocate to us. Like, that's not even a joke. I'm looking at the school board right now, and I've talked to my board members. No one has come to them about the other day when that woman said 90 days with no HVAC. I would have never wanted that for a child. Please show me the email where that was sent to us. Please show me where that was communicated. They can't. So if I know they're not advocating for these black kids that feel like they're dealing with racial disparities, to the teachers that are sitting in the back of the room texting on their phones pretending like I'm not talking, they dang sure can't advocate for y'all. So that's where the issue is. Y'all like, okay, what we need to do, let's get rid of the black people. Mubinga gone. B. Coast gone. All right. Now Machina Burns gone. Brenda Howerton gone. C.J. Davis gone. Elaine O'Neal gone. We ain't the problem. We are not the problem. It's the folks sitting in the boat not wanting to rock it. They more comfortable sitting in the boat as an elected official. I don't have a problem getting in there in the pool with the black kids that's drowning. I scared the hell out of my staff last week. You know why? Because I finally broke down crying, because I know I got to get the money right over here, but I got dead black kids in Durham. I watched teachers sitting here the other day when Dennis Garrett got up there and they rolled their eyes. He said, I'm trying to help these kids because they're not in school. That wasn't an indictment of them. If a kid gets shot at age 14 at 10:30, by virtue of the fact that he is 14 and it's 11 o'clock, he was not in school. That is a fact. That has nothing to do with teaching. What I think is that we have had a school board, and I'm going to say it to y'all face and y'all here, who have failed these students. I have no problem saying that to y'all, since y'all don't pick up the phone when I call. I have absolutely no problem saying that. We sat in a joint city-county school board meeting the other day, and you had the nerve enough to say, oh my gosh, our tax rate is lower than Wade County's. Before I could say anything, this commissioner said it's not. This is before they changed it. You've been sitting on this board for 10, 12 years, and you don't even know what a tax rate is. Bro, do the homemaker. Like, help me out. Like, I don't get it at this point. How you don't know that? And I'm saying this to the teachers. The person that you all elected does not know what the tax rate is. If she don't know what the tax rate is, how in the world can she ask for money for y'all? She can't, because she don't even know what she's doing, because she don't pay bills in her own house. So I'm going to say that. The other thing I want to point out here, you said that, and I get it. You want to defend them. You in community with them. You ain't in community with me, so you don't know me. You don't know me. But you said that it was divisive and irresponsible to break down the dollar amounts. Well, the dollar amounts are broken down when they're bought to us, so I don't see that there's a problem that we regurgitate those back. But the reason why we do them, some people up here do it to protect themselves, because they know if they send money over there, they can't. Legally, we can't say what to do with it. But the other reason why I like to say it is because for 50 years, before I was here, before you was here, black families had growth disinvestment in their schools, and so they want to know where the money goes. You know why the parents can tell you where the Bloomberg money is going? Because y'all did a press release. You know how they can tell you about growing together with the McKinsey Scott men? Because you told them. You have to tell parents, and you can tell what folks at the school board want to tell parents and what they don't want to tell parents. And I'm going to end this up, because right now we're doing a superintendent search. Thank God Javanya Lewis went to the Durham committee and said, hey, Durham committee, I think y'all need to demand to have a meeting. You need to demand to have one between the Zoom and people in person, because once again, I was there. I don't know if y'all noticed. I show up for y'all. Y'all don't show up for us. I showed up. There was some great questions asked, some great stuff put forward. It was about 45 people between the Zoom and that. Now, that's at the Durham committee. And somebody get me right, Hillside, Southern, whatever the three high schools were, there were not even 15 parents that showed up for a superintendent search in a school of over 30,000 children. Let that sink in. I couldn't believe, how is it at the last minute we sent something to the Durham committee and we almost got 50 people to show up, and you all had sent out an email for weeks about the superintendent search and we couldn't even get 15 parents. So I want folks to understand there is a concerted effort to keep people ignorant, whether it be children, whether it be teachers, whether it be parents. And I'm going to end on this because I see it's a lot of letters going around. For 3 years, I've been on this board, and everything that the school board has asked for, we have voted on. But we have gotten letters to our homes that say we are disappointed in you. Most pointedly, they say they're disappointed in this woman. This woman doesn't do anything that we don't ask her. She needs 3 votes to move anything in this budget. So once again, we're like, how can we attack the black executive that's done absolutely nothing? Because that's what y'all really good at. So that's where the letters have gone to. I'm disappointed in her. Y'all ain't sent no letters to Phil Berger House. You ain't sent no letters to Tim Morehouse. And those are the people that are in a position to actually fund public schools, and they're doing it because they don't want to, and we are doing it because we literally can't. I broke down crying the other day because, not because of this, but because there was a black man standing there. Y'all know Chief Chalmers. He just want to save black kids. He could be home, retiring. He was like, I just need this money to save a few more black kids, and I'm crying because you all want them to go to school. I want them to go to school, but I want them to be alive. And this man wants them to be alive too. And in trying to help you with your budget, I can't help him. And that is a horrible feeling, to think that you have to help somebody beg for their life. And that is what we do up here. It's a few of us up here. Y'all in here, Dennis. Y'all don't know about the gang violence that goes on at night. Y'all don't know about the prostitutes, the period. You don't know some of the stuff that we see on this county commission. And I get it. I swear to God, I get it. I don't want kids to have to be without HVAC. I don't want to be without good food. I don't want to be in mold. But you all came in here, and you all put something on us. And to be honest, my colleagues will tell you, I've talked to the majority of them, we're going to try to do something. We're going to try to do something. And it's not because, and I'm going to say this so unequivocally, but after the meeting, didn't me and you talk? And we came up with a number, and we came and said, how we going to do it? I'm incensed that we got to raise taxes and the city does, and the only thing we're going to do is put more black people out of their homes, because that's what this is going to do. I've talked to Commissioner Alam, I've talked to Commissioner Carter, I haven't talked to Commissioner Howerton yet, but you know who ain't talked to us about y'all money? Them people who walked up in here with this performative allyship today. So we're going to try to figure this thing out. We are. And I agree with somebody. I don't want, ma'am, I've looked you up. I don't have no problem with you. I get it. They done told you to hate me. That's fine. I hope we can have coffee in a decade. But I don't want the new superintendent to come in here and be at a disadvantage either. But the reason why Commissioner Jacobs is asking all these pointed questions is because, quite frankly, we have given you more money every year after year after year after year, and every year you mismanage it. So when we ask questions, it has nothing to do with your acumen as a teacher. It has everything to do with the fact that you have 7 people over there who have disenfranchised you all by mismanaging your money for the past decade, and they're going to continue to do it after it's because we just got done with an election. And so that is what is scary to us. I don't know. She asked 3 different ways. What controls do you have in place? What controls? Because that's her nice way of saying, I don't trust y'all neither. That is her nice way of saying, I don't trust y'all either. And that's why she said, is it codified? Like, is it somewhere where we can legally say, y'all do not mess up this money again? So please stop this craziness about the county commission does not support teachers. Stop all of it. We don't trust the school board. I don't trust the school board. And I'm okay saying that. And I don't think black parents have a problem with me saying that, because they don't. And last time I checked, we didn't see a whole bunch of them at the public hearing. Y'all think I didn't unload like I wanted to. I got to go pray. My sister's about to go into surgery. I really want to say some other stuff to y'all, but I'm going to hold my mule, as my daddy would say. Does anybody, you want to respond to something? Do you have something? To the DAE folks, I ain't got nothing against y'all. I got something against the fact that you all have been led astray by people who do not know what they're doing.
The only thing I wanted to say is I do think it's important in this interim seat happening to be here during this process to elevate the things that have not risen to the level of community conversation, because part of my primary role from day one is to build a bridge to whoever the next superintendent is, and by really bringing to light the places where investments, in particular, for me, it's the operations and the facilities piece that has been deferred years over years over years, and perhaps there's not been great understanding of what those needs are like given the age of our buildings and what's happening in them now. This initial request talking about the amount of the deferred needs that would need to be put in place in order to move forward, because I have that data now, because I've asked people to produce it, I think it is important to share it, because whoever comes into this seat next is going to be sitting in some needs that are critical moving forward, and elevating some of that at this point in time, trying to deal with the classified compensation work that did not get implemented properly in the last year based on the financial modeling just didn't work. Trying to tackle where that is now and bring to light what I know, what I found, what we're able to, everything that we're able to talk about, so that whoever comes into this seat next, some of those more difficult pieces about what the landscape looks like moving forward and what the needs are have been brought to light, so that that person has really, quite frankly, the greatest opportunity to be successful, because some things have already been put out in the universe prior to him or her coming on board.
Commissioner Carter.
Well, thank you, Interim Superintendent Moore, for this intense, heavy folder work information for us. I know that we'll all study it, and it'll help us, get a little closer to trying to understand what the Board of Education has to understand about its complicated budget. And I do think that the school systems across, North Carolina, their budgets are some of the most complex, because there are multiple sources of funding that have to be taken into account. There's dollar allotments from the state. There's teacher allotments from the state. There's effort to try to work with those in such a way to maximize the use of the state dollars. I just remember thinking it was incredibly difficult to understand the school district's budget. And I know that there have been some grave human errors made this past year related to wages, and this work is intensely, it's a human endeavor, and so, mistakes will be made, and now we're really trying to work together to correct them, and I appreciate all that's been done to date by the Board of Education and by the interim administration to reset and to try to right size. I really appreciated, honestly, having you start with some accolades. Those were wonderful points of information for us that we should all be lifting up to celebrate our public schools, to try to build faith and confidence in our public schools, because that's what we want. I really think we all want this. Every single one of us want Durham to be the county that we want to be known for having the best schools. Not just, having great food in our restaurants and playing the best basketball. We want to have the best schools. And I believe that we are on a trajectory to get there. So it's also incredible, the reductions in spending that you've recommended, the 15% operating reductions, the one that amounted to $6 million. And not only that, but the deferred needs. And I did want to ask about that, because I do believe that facility needs have been deferred for almost a decade. I remember in 2016 that there was a need close to, I think, $500 million then for capital maintenance needs and building new schools kinds of projects, and the bond that went forward at that time was only $91 million, and so these things do compound over time, and that is what I think contributed to some of the comments we heard about 90 days of no air conditioning, and that is something that none of us want to have. I know you all don't want to have it, we don't want to have it, and so when I see deferred HVAC needs and things, it worries me. Will we be fixing schools that when they come forward and say air conditioning is broken and my child doesn't have water in the water fountain and these kinds of things that we're hearing, those aren't going to be deferred?
We're triaging.
You're triaging.
We're triaging. So I could give you a list right now of $5 million worth of things that have been designed and are ready to go, and we don't have the funds for.
Okay.
And I could give you another list of we anticipate being another $5 million worth of needs that are priorities right behind it, but they haven't been designed yet. But there's $5 million that's already been designed, ready to go. I asked for all of that after I got here, okay? So when I got here and I saw where we were headed and what might be part of the budget development process, I was like, I need numbers, I need order of schools, I need what our most critical areas of needs are. And you have a little bit of document that's a few years old, actually, in the back of your document as well. But I've asked for some updated information to see, because some work has been done since those documents were created that are at the back of your packet. There's over $16 million worth of work that's been done in schools through the ESSER funds. There's a chart that you have in your materials that shows that. It's a big need. And but we are triaging right now, which means that if something goes out, we go and figure out what it needs to happen to be fixed. We have a few projects that we do every year that are life cycle type things, but everything is past its actual life for the most part. And our buildings have way gone beyond their life expectancy, and the equipment and supplies and so forth in there as well. The other thing, when buildings are this old, if you need a part that's not made anymore, we actually sourced the part from an ERD unit in another county about a month ago, where we sort of had to I had to be engaged because I had to sign paperwork to allow it to expedite it and move it through the budget process so that we could drive to whatever county this was in to pick up the piece that they had in an ERD chiller unit or something along those lines to bring back to a school here, because those parts in those units aren't even made anymore. That is becoming all too common in terms of how we have to find the parts in order to repair existing facilities, equipment. And that is why a plan to move forward that prioritizes our highest needs, that is ready to go when funds are available, that it's in place. And I'd just like to say thank you to Commissioner Burns, because we got to ask. So.
And so, hearing all that, it was great to know that you're being a triage doctor now and trying to figure out what needs to be maintained first. Can we have some understanding, I guess, from our staff and from the DPS administration about how we'll work together to address all these capital needs that are feeling so urgent now, like using the general obligation bond funding that we have, using our ability to leverage limited obligation bonds, any ARPA funding, any, and I think we even received something about some ideas, but I'm not asking for, the exact process or procedure or plan right now, but I would like some reassurance that we have one, or that we're going to have one soon, so that we can take care of our schools' capital needs, the schools that I think have an average age of 50 years old.
I'll just say that I have asked the board chair to reach out. I did reach out via email to the county manager about a week ago or so to say at some point, can we get a meeting together to talk about some of these things? So hopefully something will be calendared soon. On my side, on our side, for the school system side, we're working on getting the information that's necessary to understand how much we're talking about, what the priorities are, and then to be ready for the conversation on how do we partner to move forward.
And one thing I don't really understand is if there's $5 million of planned and designed projects ready to move forward, could any of the general obligation bond money be used for that? Would you want to do that? Would that set you, off of a pathway that you're already on, that is the policy decision of the board is it's best to keep going that way? Just wondering about
that.
Well,
I don't think we have contemplated changing, and you've got some documents that let you know sort of what the current status is of the CIP and the implementation and where those dollars are implemented or allocated right now, what's already been spent in different areas. I would say that I have certainly not had the conversation about reallocating those dollars to help meet some of those needs. I'm perfectly comfortable having that conversation, but I need to have it. I need to know where we are already obligated, where we are already moving forward on different kinds of things, and whether or not that rearranging is something, what the cost is, just the pros and cons of it.
Right, the pros and cons, exactly, which I would have no idea what those are without having, the opportunity to study that kind of thing in detail. And nor do I, as a commissioner, want to be accountable for that, for the decisions that you have all the information on. People have asked us to be about some of these capital things, and I think we need to respect the boundaries of authority there. Doesn't mean we can't ask a lot of questions, clearly, which we do like to do,
Right.
but
We are collaboratively, we must be good stewards of the public dollar.
exactly. Okay, that's all for me for right now. Thanks. Well, let me just say, I want to piggyback on Wendy's. I want to be clear that I understand the $8.8 million for implementation of the classified salary study will put DPS on the trajectory to be market rate competitive, including Durham County as a market partner?
It'll achieve the market rate base pay that was the goal of the compensation study. And I almost hate stepping into this, but I want to be completely transparent. That is not the same as a living wage.
Is it the same as the calculated living wage that Durham County has for
It
its
is not.
employees? It is not.
It is not. And so those are, I see those as parallel paths, but they are not the same in this particular case. That number would be much higher if we were talking about a living wage based on Durham and dealing with what would likely be compression across other job classifications if you didn't deal with that on the front end, which is a best practice. You know, if you're raising the lower end of the scale, you want to make that commensurate across the entire scale to not end up with compressed salaries.
Well, to me, that just means it's even more expedient that we invest the 8.8 to at least get the classified staff on a parallel path with the goal of being on the same path. I mean, I believe that DPS classified staff members need to be, benchmarked against what the county makes for its lowest salary, and that's $19.22 this year, and it's going up. So if we could have a ballpark figure of what you think the minimum wage is going to be for your classified staff after the $8.8 million, if
I think it's just shy of 18.
It's just shy of 18. So we had the fight for 15, and then we had the fight for 17, and we're up to 18. Are we moving? I would hope that as a community we want to move towards the fight for a living wage, whatever it is calculated as, and think about that collectively between the city, the school district, and the county. And we all pay this. We all have the same living wage, and we have our living wage policies, and we adhere to them as a community. So if we could work on that too as a plan going forward, if it can't happen this year and it's feeling really dismal that that's a possibility, I would at least like a multi-year plan for how to be sure that Durham Public Schools' lowest paid staff are making the same lowest minimum wage that Durham County is making. Thank you.
Before we go to Commissioner Howerton, I want to go to the manager. She has something she wanted to ask. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Carter's question about, are we looking at doing things differently? And so just want to recall that was when we first got the $26 million ask. It's one of the things that I said to this board is we are going to have to make a seismic shift in how we receive, review, and make decisions about funding the schools. We cannot continue to operate this way. It is not productive. Our kids deserve better. Our
Amen.
Community deserves better. And so the suggestion that I brought forward was that we now meet with the school system on a regular basis to have these types of conversations, to ask the questions that you have asked, because that may have very well been the place where things came up to say, hey, we have an HVA system that is down. I know our staff, DCM Hager has said, that is something we want to make sure we immediately address.
Thank you.
And so that is what we are proposing. We are looking to meet on Wednesday. We are hopefully looking at 9:30 in the morning. I've already spoken with Chair Alum. She said that she will be in person. So my executive assistant is looking to get that calendared. She's going to work with the clerk staff to hopefully get that calendared. I've spoken with Vice Chair Burns about it. She said that she will be available. So we're looking to have our first of those conversations on this coming Wednesday, June 5th. If that time doesn't work, we will look to make sure it happens within this week. That is what we are trying to do.
And I know you got a question that's auxiliary to hers, but I want to be fair. Commissioner Howerton, go ahead.
Thank you. So where do I start? Superintendent Moore, there's so much that's going on in my head, and financial confidence is a question for me. Financial confidence in our leaders. Most of these conversations that I'm hearing today, I've heard them before and before and before. This is not new information that I'm hearing. When we talk about the things, the maintenance, the services that needs to be happening at the schools, I've heard them every year. We do bonds, we give the money. The last 3 years that I was a chair, we fully funded DPS every year for what they ask. So this is not new information when you say the air conditioning units or the whatever is not working. The question for me is financial. What is happening financially in DPS that every year we get the same questions? And this year is compounded. It's double what we've been hearing. I've been on this board for 16 years, and I've heard the same questions, the same concerns. We're not moving. We're not moving forward. We are in a position of even going backward. I'm really perplexed when Commissioner Burns says she's talked to most of the board. They haven't talked to me because I have questions that the financial stability of how it's being managed at DPS, and you haven't been here, I understand that. You're here trying to manage an emergency that has happened. I get that. But these questions, I mean, we talked the last 3 years we had before this manager, we had another manager ask for accountability. They run him out of Durham because he asked for accountability of what's going on with our tax dollars. So anytime someone from this board begin to ask those questions, they get fired or they get unelected. Well, I don't have to worry about that. I've served my time. So I'm asking the questions that everybody, every citizen in this county, because the more we raise taxes, the more seniors that will be out of their homes because they can't afford it. But when I talk to some of the people that I've talked to over the last few weeks about the money and raising taxes even more, what they tell me is that's not their concern. Well, it is my concern. Our children are my concern, and seniors are my concern. I can't say it's not my concern because seniors have invested their lives in this community and in their homes. And we're saying, okay, too bad. We're going to raise your taxes because DPS demands that they get more money, or people will leave Durham. Do you know how many times I've heard that crap? I won't say what it really is to me. I've heard that over and over again. So I've been struggling with, for us to get a budget like this, there was no strategic planning here to give in this economic status of where our budget is, where our money is right now, for us to get a budget from DPS that says you want $26.5 million, $27.5 million, we are cutting all of our departments by 10%. We are just cutting everything we can to try and give DPS money. I don't think that's fair to the rest of our community. I'm just struggling with that because it's just totally not fair to the rest of the citizens. And not only that, but whatever we do this year, next year we will add on to that. So if we give 27.5 this year, what will be the ask next year to add on to that? And the citizens in this community has to pay for that. And not only that, but when we talk about the schools, and if we're having problems with the maintenance in our schools, what's happening to the bond? What's happening? We do a bond, we've been doing it every, 4 or 5 years? Did we go 9 years? Okay, so we did one the last year. Now we're getting ready to do another one. So I'm just really struggling with the management. I won't say mismanagement because I don't have the facts. But what I have is a $27.5 million budget. That makes no sense.
Well,
And, to stagger, I could understand if it was a staggering budget where you've got how do you plan to do something about this in the next 5 years? But that's not it. It's, we want the money now. Makes no sense.
so I'll just say these are the compensation study request, the 8.8 million. This is the second year. And so it is about completing the work that started in the past year that is costing more than what was modeled. We're reporting what it will cost. Durham has a cadence over the last few years of asking for support for teacher salaries one year, classified salary the next year, and alternating that. So this year, for the request for 24-25, would have been a request for support for teacher compensation, certified staff compensation, and not classified. So in this particular case, because of the compensation study and the classified salary schedules being botched in the last school year and a commitment to try to see that work through, you see both in the request this year, where normally it's only been one or the other. I do think it of note, the $6 million that is provided every year for capital has been $6 million for a while now, and that is what funds daily upkeep and needs, not deferred needs of capital needs. So increasing that amount is just recognizing that the $6 million is your day-to-day putting out the fires and maintenance that's needed, cutting grass, that sort of thing. It is not the number of chillers that are going down, the number of HVAC units that need to be replaced, that sort of thing. And I do think that how a bond is allocated, if there is space for that negotiation, and whatever the process is that the commissioners or the school system have in place to make changes in that, is something that we need to do if we haven't already done that. And that suggestion was made earlier, and that's something I'm taking out of here and going back with to see, okay, what is the space that's there in terms of where we're committed and where there might be space to rearrange that.
So let me ask one other thing. So if you've got schools that are in trouble, that are having maintenance issues, why do we build new schools and the schools that we have are in trouble, need maintenance, and we're building new schools, and the other thing is we're losing students. So we're losing students, but we're building new schools, and the ones that we have are in trouble. So
yeah.
how do you explain that?
Yeah, so I think that is the community that has come together to whatever the messaging on the last bond proposal for new schools, from my understanding, has to do with both anticipated growth that's based on how residential permits are being, there's a science to geolocating where a new school is needed based on what's happening with residential growth and where current schools exist. That is the work that what I am used to happens in the background prior to siting new schools and determining where a new school needs to be built. The county does not have the kind of growth in its overall numbers over the last few years that seems to indicate that need. But there must be some future modeling that has happened that indicated that need, that is what was presented and approved as a part of what was put forth before the voters. So that, I don't know if I could speak fully to that, but.
I was wondering when one of y'all was going to come up here and help this woman.
I just first let me say thank you. This collaboration does take transparency and honesty and accountability. So this conversation is important for us to know where y'all are, what you're thinking, the questions that you have, so we can chart a path forward. I've been appreciative of Dr. Sowell's openness to the collaboration between us and more regular meetings so that we can have more of this conversation. And I've asked, too, for a multi-year budget, because we have to be planning more intentionally around these increased asks, especially the ones that we might know we anticipate coming. So to your question around we have schools in South Durham that are overcrowded. We have students in trailers. They are busting at the seams. And the population growth in Durham is mostly in the South and then the East. So the new schools, the new elementary schools that we've built are in South Durham to help relieve overcrowding in some of those schools. In the whole county, in the whole DPS though, yes, enrollment is decreasing, but we've seen booms in certain areas and those schools were overflowing with students. Some of that happened in redistricting, moving some students around and opening the new schools have allowed to alleviate the overcrowding. That's mostly in the South where we see that happening. Some of the projections for where future neighborhoods are coming, we can see that in the East. We're watching closely around where new developments are coming. So if those schools become overcrowded, how are we going to move students around and make sure that the buildings aren't overflowing? We see in North Durham, we don't have as much of a boom. But South and North are very far apart. So how are we making sure we're building schools for capacity for those students?
So, but that still doesn't explain the lack of strategy and planning for what's happening to your other buildings. You know, is there a 5-year plan? Is there a plan to do all these things that you're saying that's going to be done, and where's the accountability of any of this? I mean, the more we give money, the less accountability there is.
So I'll just say that there is a plan on paper. There's just not funding behind the plan. And when I've looked at the last few years' worth of budget requests that have come from the system, I was trying to get a cadence for how requests are made and how they're divided up. There has been increased requests for funds, $10 million 2 years in a row, but those requests did not include dollars specifically targeted towards capital needs. They were about compensation or other needs in the district, not for capital needs. This is the first budget in several years that I saw that includes anything in capital as a part of its request, which is why the suggestion made earlier about revisiting what's in the CIP to see if there's space there is, if there's a mechanism to do that, I think that's an important next look. But the district has not been requesting dollars targeted towards maintenance, operations, capital needs.
So I remember there was a request for chillers that we provided the resources for. I don't have the list of
Yeah, I think
the
those
things
are one-offs, not
Yeah.
necessarily part of the budget development process. And I think they're probably driven by an emergency need where funds are not available. And really what the 1.5 and any work moving forward is about is applying strategy to looking long-term what those needs are and prioritizing and asking for the funds wherever they might need to come from in order to do the work. The need is not going to go away.
So you're saying that had, up till now, there has not been included in the budget process?
I think it's been discussed every year, and it's been deferred every year in deference to the work that's been done around salaries and other needs in the district that rose above these capital needs. And so I think what's important about this one is putting it forward.
But it didn't come to this board.
It did what now?
It did not come to
No,
this
it did
board.
not come to this
Okay.
board. I do not believe that I have seen it come to this board unless it was a one-off like you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just.
And
I'm
I'll just
still
also say that for
struggling with-
this, I also say that for the last 3 years anyway, it probably would not have come to this board because of the availability of the ESSER funds.
Right.
And so there was, $16 million of the most recent ESSER funds have gone into school-type facilities in terms of needs. And so HVAC, chillers, that sort of work, air quality things that were allowable expenses. So you probably wouldn't have seen it for at least the last 3 years because of the availability of ESSER funds.
I'm going to say this, and I'm going to be finished, Vice Chair. I was just at a meeting, a board of directors meeting for the State Association of All County Commissioners, and we had speakers there that talked about, some of our representatives that talked about increasing in taxes for education. And these were not just Republicans, these were Democrats as well. So, because, and they both said no. And you've got 50 commissioners across the state that are struggling with the same issue. Struggling with how do they fund their public schools. It is not an easy question. Everybody's struggling with it, and I just think it's really irresponsible, and I'll use that term, to put this kind of tax burden on the citizens in Durham. I'm finished.
Okay, and I know that I do want to clarify a couple of things that were thrown out, and I'm going to give it to Commissioner Jacobs. So, and not picking on nobody, the manager, we have made cuts here. It wasn't a 10% cut. That was, we want to make. So we have made cuts. You're correct, Commissioner Howe. It wasn't 10 across the board. And we will just, since the media is here, we want to make sure that we get that clarified. But she is correct. Last year, $1 million. This year, $2.5 million. We raised ambulance fees. We have raised taxes in some unincorporated areas. These individuals over here will be paying most likely for their insurance for the first time. There are a myriad of things that we have done on this side every time in deference to the schools. Every solitary time. The first time I met with you, Superintendent Moore, I told you, I said, what happens once a year is that a group of 7 people comes over here with a brown paper bag and a pistol. And we always tell everybody else, let's wait until we get this, because we're going to have to then readjust everybody else's budget. And that has indeed been the case since I've been on this board. It's like we made $30 million. Okay, the schools want 15. All right, to every other department, to all the 2,000 people, to social services, to gerontology, to public safety, to emergency management, to fire, to minority business recruitment, to special projects, to facilities. Y'all got to split this 50% because we got to put 50% over here. So I do want to make that clear. I want to make that clear. But you also brought up a very valid point. Yes, we did stuff for classification. We did stuff for classified staff, and we did stuff for certified staff, and it was every other year. And so we were looking forward, and this is where the divisiveness comes in. We were looking forward to doing master's pay this year because, as I've said, my sisters left, and I'd like for them to come back to Durham Public Schools. They're over in Orange County right now, working on becoming principals. But last year, And this is where we were all duped and lied to, and there's no other way to say it. But nobody sent out an email said I'm disgusted by LeSueur. But y'all sure were disgusted by the black man, the same black man that came to me and before we even started a bond hearing. You know how I was sold on the bond? Dr. Mubin came to me and said, these schools are disgusting. I want my kids to live in aesthetically pleasing learning environments. Got it, Doc. How much you need? 400, 500 million? What do you need? Because this man had not lied to me about anything. And I wish y'all saw how much that man fought for y'all, and y'all threw him out on his ass. And I'm not, let me move on. Last year, this is what was in the press release from y'all's office, from our office. It said when we did the budget, it was $889,514,622. It included, but was not limited to, additional financial support of $1.57 million for certified salary increases and $1.52 million for classified increases and $4.9 million for classified study proposed salary increases. So let me tell y'all something. I will never forget when Dr. Mubinga sat right there and LeSueur was sitting his behind there. I asked the manager before we came in, is that the amount of money we gonna need? She said, that's what they said. I said, you done met with him? She said, I done met with him. And I said, okay, I'm going to ask him again on camera. She said, go for it. I said, right there. And the emails that WRAL pulled it, that man knew he was lying. I don't know how y'all have not pressed charges on it, but I know why, because he your boy. He's your boy, and you don't want him to go to jail. I can't wait till I'm a private citizen so I can go after him myself for sitting in here and lying to us time and time again about this doggone budget and that girl that he got working in California, who I hope is fired, and I'm going to do a public records request to find out. I also want to throw out here, I see some folks in here worried about DSA. I tend to agree with my colleague, Commissioner Carter, on this one. I think y'all have more information on us the same way we have more information on Medicaid fraud. We have more information on small business. Y'all know more information about what y'all need to build, so I know what the ask is. But what I do want to throw out, I recognize that the 160 plus million that y'all got in ESSERS, I had a lot of questions about it. Dr. Mubinga set me down, and he said, well, some of it is line item for specific things. Once that brother told me that, I didn't go after the ESSERS money. Some of it was for laptops, some of it was to find dislocated kids. So I was like, I can't use this as a catch-all, much like ARPA. But let me tell this to some of the people sitting in here who have not been peeped to game. Number one, we have given you all, with 2,000 less children in the school system over the past decade, we've given you all an additional $50 million, dang near $60 million. If this was Microsoft, all y'all would be fired by now, because ain't no way in the world you would have less people, less operational costs, and no additional programmatic expansion that I can see, less after-school programs, and you all continue to need additional money. On top of that, we gave you $423 million for a bond. We give you $300 to $400 million every year. You get, I don't know how many grants, I don't know, from the state, and you got some McKinsey Scott money. There's all this money, and then it's never enough. And I'm saying it because I want the community to hear me. You would not run your household like this. Somebody asked one day, why do you think Congress broke? I said, because the people in Congress broke. Why do you think the school board broke? Because the people who are over it don't know how to do nothing with money, and I can tell that from the questions you answer. And to be honest, I hate that you got to sit here, ma'am. I really seriously do, because you've been here 3 months, and thank you so much for everything you've given us. I thought your finance staff was here, but you were a true leader, because you said, you know what, I'm not going to line them up in the line of fire. But I'm looking at y'all. I can't believe y'all wouldn't sit up here. I remember when we was going through the comprehensive plan, they were tearing Sarah and that staff a new one. I got up, I was like, you're not going to come after my staff like that. When we were trying to rebuild them libraries and they was ripping Tammy back at a new one, I went right to them public hearings and I stood up. I can't believe y'all not standing up here with these people right now. To DAE, this is their usual posture. Take a picture of it and know for the next 4 years it will maintain the same way. I'm going to move on right now because I know you have some questions that book into hers. But again, the trust issue, over $700 million, and every year y'all need more. It makes no mathematical sense at all. But I'm going to find y'all's money. I'm going to find the capital improvement, because I ain't going to scorch the earth, because that's what y'all want black folks to do. I'm going to leave fertile ground, and I'm going to support this budget because I know that this is the only thing black kids got to go to in this community. It ain't because of y'all. It's because of the kids that you all been crapping on for 4 years, and I ain't going to let them get crapped on the last year I'm in office.
So I want to go back to the question regarding needing $5 million for some immediate capital needs. I don't think we can talk about this without understanding, first of all, really understanding about being able to use the bond money, because there are literally, hundreds, I don't know the exact number right now, but available to be used. Over $100 million, at least, that we've already approved that are sitting in some account somewhere. But I don't think we can talk about this without talking about DSA. I mean, there's just no way. All of these issues are related. I know I need to understand the decision-making around DSA, and I think the community needs to understand, because within this context of a financial budgetary crisis, of urgent needs for health and well-being at existing schools, and then facing a incredible new school, state-of-the-art school that is going to be way beyond what was expected, it requires a pause. I mean, it's just like, within your own household, if something happens, there's a crisis and things aren't, you have to stop and reevaluate. And that is really critical. I really need to understand this, the decision-making at this point in time, not 2022, but 2024, about what is the best decision at this moment. I understand costs have been sunk into, the design. I don't know exactly, the details. It's going to be very important for us and for the community to have that information. I have been involved personally in projects where I've been very personally invested and where we've spent substantial public dollars, the light rail, and we had to change course. So it just doesn't make sense to me to, on the one hand, have this urgency about $5 million, but on the other hand, not blinking about spending a huge amount of money on what I know will be an incredible state-of-the-art facility. And so I really would like for us to get all of the information about any of the studies, including I see John Hodges Koppel sitting in the back here, but anything done independent assessment. We really need an independent assessment of even what the different options are, and there really needs to be a pause on this. It's also really undermining public confidence and the prospects for future bonds, for us to not have a pause, not have to have real due diligence and understanding where we are at this moment in time. I'm not questioning the decisions that were made in the past, but where we are right now. And I just want to lift up the responsibility that we do have for how county dollars are spent. Thanks to John, John, who's, I don't know if he's still here, our grant person. Oh, there, dear John. Okay, you're trying to hide, but yeah, who's actually, I didn't realize he'd come from the Department of Public Instruction, but he shared with us, General Statute 115C-429C, that the Board of County Commissioners has the authority to call for, and the Board of Education shall have the duty to make available to the Board of County Commissioners upon request all books, records, audit reports, and other information bearing on the financial operation of the school administrative unit that includes any information required as part of the budget development process. So this is within our responsibilities as county commissioners. And I just want to say we have jointly failed, both of our boards, on following through with our memorandum of understanding. We signed an MOU back in 2017, and we've just dropped the ball on it. And I really hope that Madam Manager and Interim Superintendent and whoever is gathering for the start of these meetings of working together, that we will go back and look at the MOU from 2017 and really think about how we can deliver on what is in here. For instance, number 5 says that, I'm sorry, not number 5, number 11 talks about joint planning prior to the purchase of school sites and prior to finalizing the architectural specifications for school buildings. I mean, we've just never done that. We just haven't. We get information, but it's not joint working together, staffs working together jointly, and leadership. And also, there's a lot in here about data sharing, but on both sides. And what I would recommend again is that our staff comes up with a schedule when we have our quarterly meetings, which are these data points that we are going to report on and share information on, and that we are really making data-based decisions. There's just a lot that we aren't doing and that we need to really do. I say that on both sides, that I think there's a lot in here for us to work on moving forward. Also, related to Durham Pre-K, I see Linda Chappelle sitting here.
If I could say one thing about
Yes. Go ahead.
the MOU,
Absolutely.
the joint MOU. I think a good place to start with your questions might be to take a look at the MOU and have staff, take a look at what is happening or not happening. There are some joint meetings happening. I'm not sure who's in those meetings and what they're deciding or what the roles are, but I know there are joint meetings happening. And so I think relying on what's in the MOU and providing an update on what the status of that implementation and partnership looks like to see, can it be improved, can it be modified, or are things working and perhaps the flow of information isn't flowing the way that it should. I don't know which one it is, but I think we could start with the MOU to see the extent to which it is being implemented and provide an update there. I do believe that as part of your the quarterly joint meetings that you have, a cadence that includes a CIP or bond update that provides the data points that you're talking about, that's a meeting that's already happening. That would be something that I believe I think most superintendents would have some familiarity with, that being the setting in which those kinds of things happen. And those kinds of updates are jointly planned between staff at the county and staff in the school system. So I think that's a place to go with that. And I just wanted to mention that.
Those are great suggestions. Thank you. And I just also want to lift up, what we've already talked about in our budget work sessions are, for instance, directly funding the pre-K at Murray-Massenburg, how to address. We're trying to come up with creative ways to address these things. But I will say that for me, I really want to know how we can, again, implement some type of an MOU, ILA, related to the specific asks that we've gotten from our early childhood coordinator, Maytal Barak, who's sitting right here, and also from Linda. And there were, 3 or 4 basic points. One is around the data sharing that we need to do. We need to have that critical. And then number 2 is around a plan for getting all of the Durham DPS
Licensed.
Yeah, credentialed and certified. And then also about the RAP care. So I know it's not something we can get in place by the time we're going to need to improve the budget, but we really need a commitment from you that this is something that we will, that will be done.
And it intersects with the capital planning.
Yeah.
Because this will, especially the certification of classrooms require capital dollars.
Absolutely.
And I know that you were in here when that discussion was going
I'm ready.
on. Right. Can I just, again, and not the, there are so many other conversations that go on that I feel like our teachers don't know about. This woman, she had to come in here the other day when J.B. Buxton was presenting, or when Dr. Chappelle was in here, but she sat in here, and when each one of them got done, I watched her. She was in community with both of them, and she heard our request, and that was mainly because we sat and we were talking, and we said we don't want to leave any money on the table that the state might have, because we have these higher. higher standards than what the state has, right? But who else was in here? Same thing. It was a teacher who was up there. She was talking about how much she didn't like the auditorium at C.C. Spalding. I never would stop a public hearing because I told them in the beginning that I wouldn't. But we moved that $2 million to set that a couple of months ago. I just feel like there's a lot that we doing here, and we're not looking to be patted on the back, but God knows y'all got to start passing this information on. So I do appreciate you being in here. I'm happy that you brought it. To be honest, I'm literally happy you brought it up on camera so that I could just say, we do this. We do this. And people do show. Certain people, they don't. But certain people do, and that's how we're going to move these kids forward, and that's how we're going to be successful from top to bottom. But, yeah, some of the stuff, there are things that y'all have asked for, and I would like to see that $5 million list. I know and don't mean I can do anything about it tomorrow, but if you triage the list, don't wait for them to tell you to give it to me. They never going to tell you that. Send it to me now. I've publicly asked for it. Don't know how much of a dent we can make in it, but we'll try.
I did have two more follow-up questions.
Go for it. We on time.
Okay.
We overtime.
Okay, all right.
We are overtime.
One is, I would really like, and this is not something that I know can answer now. I do really want to understand, though, about decision-making around, with decreasing enrollments, but we've got population growth in other areas. Was any thinking or decision-making around looking at, with the Growing Together, evaluation of how to save money by possibly shutting down a school? I mean, again, we're in a different time. We know that we are going to have to be locally funding so much of this stuff, and everything has to be on the table. I also want to understand around staffing, because one thing I didn't see in your fiscal measures are around vacancies and how, like, I know, for instance, we're having a hiring freeze, except with some of the very critical departments like EMS or DSS. I see that you have like same number of FTEs basically. So I would like to understand that again. Same thing.
Yep.
How that is factoring of when you've got, how you're not looking at utilizing some vacancies or reducing FTEs at this point within this
So I will
crisis.
I'll just say that I'm going to do two. First, let me talk about the pre-K, because I did accost Ms. Chappelle after her presentation last week, and we just whispered back and forth a bit so that I could get a little bit of clarity on some of the comments that were made and some of the questions that were asked. And then went back and talked to staff that very same afternoon. So I want to go ahead and tell you what we've already talked about and what our current plan is moving forward. First, there's actually already some work happening around data sharing, an agreement that would move forward. And so what I went back and said to my folks is, we need to bring this to the finish line. Figure out what the questions are that are still hanging out there and solidify that. I did speak a little bit with Ms. Chappelle about the overarching vision of what that looks like. We serve, the different programs in the district that in Durham County that exist, whether it's Head Start or private providers or Durham Public School System. There should be a collaboration around, and everybody wants to know what the ROI is. There are a lot of studies that tell us how important pre-K is. Let's show us in the data. I don't have an issue with that. So I think that we will get to where we need to be with that data sharing agreement, because some work has actually already happened. We just need to get it across the finish line. The second piece about the licensed classrooms. I will just say, in a previous life, I did the same exact thing somewhere else, where I said we have got to have more of our classrooms be licensed so that we have full flexibility and ability to advocate for and receive the dollars that are available for the most number of slots for them to serve the most number of students. Some of the barriers around, I don't know if barriers is the right word, but there are impacts associated with licensing classrooms. The biggest one is facility renovations. There are likely to be millions of dollars worth of facility needs, whether it's things like sinks or water temperature or playground. Anything else big that I'm missing? That are a financial impact. In all transparency, I served on the board of Smart Start for the last 10 years in neighboring county. So and that's where sort of my passion around getting this done and getting classrooms licensed and how important it was started. And so what I've brought to this district in my short time here is a request that we provide the community, the commissioners, the board, like a 5-year plan or a multi-year plan that says, okay, so we have a vision that we will have pre-K in every school. What's our cadence for that? How many are we adding per year? When is that expected to happen? What's the cost associated with that based on the number of seats? Parallel to that, what is the impact, the cost, and what needs to happen in order to have our classrooms licensed? What are the facility costs? How much is it going to take? How much time? How many can we do per year? And bring that information as well so that it's part of a 5-year plan also. There are some other pieces with license that are personnel costs, the number of hours that the IAs serve, the rate at which they have to be paid that is different right now than the rate at which IAs and DPS are paid right now. So there are costs associated with doing that. But until we model those costs and show what it would look like in a multi-year plan, you're not making a decision one way or another from an informed perspective. So all of that I just talked about is already started and happening. And I have asked our staff, and the same with the wraparound care, and I actually threw transportation in the mix as well, because sometimes transportation is a barrier for families in terms of where programs are located and being able to access them. So I've said to the staff, go back and work on a plan that includes all of those pieces. Get the data sharing agreement across the line. What is the actual impact, cost, and a multi-year plan for getting our classrooms licensed, something that is doable and reasonable and makes that impact. What does wrap care look like, and how do we advance that? What are the barriers? Because I think that's happening in private providers as well as in DPS. There are some needs there. And then transportation. Package all of that into a comprehensive multi-year plan that shows the barriers, the pros, the cons, what it would take to get there. I have asked staff to have that ready for a joint meeting of the commissioners, if not this August, then the next one, whenever that is. So they're already working on it.
Fantastic.
And I wanted you to know, I don't have the answers to all of it, but I went back after that meeting and met with staff to make sure that we were ready to bring that, because that is a goal that I think we all have in common, that we need to move forward on in terms of at least understanding what it would take to get there, and then we can make informed decisions.
That sounds great. My only request is that we include Maytal and Linda, because again, this is about us collaborating, and at the end of the day, we're going to pay for it. So
well, and I think the thing that I don't know if stung is the right word, would be not being able to fully answer a question about the support that is provided by the Durham pre-K staff for licensing and other things, and the extent to which that is or is not being accessed. So I think it is a collaborative effort. I 100% agree.
Okay.
And then the second piece you asked about.
It was just about, had there been looking at the vacancies?
Oh, yeah, so the FTEs. So number one, I think baked into the static number of FTEs is the K-3 class size reduction over the last few years. So as we had to increase the number of teachers in K-3, those FTE, we have more teachers in K-3 than we had 5 years ago. And so that has been part of that FTE remaining the same. I think when you look at overall per pupil funding, and I don't want to split hairs here, but to assume that 10 years ago, what it costs to educate a student in terms of per pupil funding and what it might cost now should remain the same is, I don't think, an accurate depiction of where we are economically in this country. So I would expect costs to be going up, really regardless of what's happening with the student enrollment. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to be paying attention to what's happening with enrollment in terms of up or down. And I think in a fully transparent budget process, what you have in a budget book is, and I've already talked to staff about this in terms of moving forward, is when you have a projected enrollment and that projected enrollment is down by 100 students, you should show in the budget the reduction associated in that per pupil of those 100 students and how that impacts the rest of your budget ask. So it could be that we are still asking for $27 million, but within that $27 million, there's a baked in 1.5 reduction, and otherwise it would be 29.2. right? But that needs to be part of what's in the budget process and in the numbers that you see, because the cost of a per pupil is going to be going up. Same as, I'll give you another sort of silly example. I've asked the board chair just about this last week. I asked whether or not the commissioners had ever seen an increase request in the budget book for utility rate increases, right? Certainly, the cost of utilities has not been the same for the last 10 years. But that's not ever been called out specifically separately in the budget, either as an ask that was needed or as a cost that was being covered by reductions in other areas. And I think that sort of level of need, transparency, and how a budget book is developed can help explain all of that. Because from what I can tell is there's not been an ask for a utility rate increase, but those rates have gone up, and so those costs have been absorbed from within the district and other places.
Right.
But I think that's the kind of the changes that we're sort of talking about. So in terms of the FTEs, I think K through class size has a lot to do with it. I do also think that that is why the allotment manual that spells out how we utilize the resources that come from the state, the federal government, and what we're carving out of local is going to be really important moving forward.
I know Linda's, her mantra is, local dollars in first and maximizing the federal and the state. And just my last comment, I completely recognize the crisis that we are in right now and the critical need for us to provide the funding for, the salaries. And they're all important, critical areas. It is clear to me that we are at a really pivotal moment in Durham Public Schools and the crisis moment that we are in. And so I know that, many members of our board, we are looking at how can we be creative, working with staff on some creative approaches to really do our best, because we do recognize how important it is. And but we also at the same time know that this can't be a regular occurrence. This is not something that we can do. I mean, it's just not possible to do every year. And so that's why the changes, the policies and the structures and all of that are going to be equally as important. The two have to happen together at the same time. And so I look forward to the work that we can do together. And I appreciate some of the foundation that you're helping with and the work that's going to start together on Wednesday. Thank you.
Any closing words for you?
I'll go first, and I'll let the chair go. I do want to thank the commissioners for the opportunity, and I can take it. Is what I want to say, right?
You shouldn't have to. That's
okay,
the
no,
issue.
Because I think it's that important, right? To have the transparency that's needed for the most effective collaboration to happen. Wherever this number lands, the board will deal with where it is, and we will look at how we prioritize those requests and be transparent about what is prioritized and move forward. We should not shy away from the questions, difficult or easy. I'm a fan of wanting to see the arrows that are being shot at me so that I can address them. I think that is part of the cadence that I'm working to set in this interim role as we prepare for the next superintendent. I value and have seen the commitment of the commissioners over the last few years with funding the requests that the district has made. I mean, I did my homework there, so I've seen it. And this request, I understand, is, I think I've called it a bold ask when I've been asked about it by folks. But I'd like to think that I'm able to explain and that we can make sense of why the request is what it is. I also feel that, I could tell you that, we obviously go through an audit every year. We have clean audits. This year we had a couple of little findings about management and reconciliations of some things, which was to be expected. You might see it again next year. But generally speaking, the management of the funds is above board. The disposition and the choices that are made and how a strategic lens is applied to where the funds go, I believe there's space for greater transparency and collaboration around that work. So I won't be here when it happens, but I look forward to reading about it.
Interim Superintendent Moore, you took some of the words right out of my mouth. I do want to say thank you. In the joint meeting, looking at that graph of where we have grown in our ask, I think that only happens through collaboration, through transparency, showing of data, talking about how we're moving students, what are the initiatives that we're putting in place. The restorative practices was an ask from you all. Having Office of Equity was an ask. Supporting our Multilingual Resource Center was an ask, and you all were able to meet those needs for our students in our building. I think we've invested a lot in our people, and now we're realizing we need to do a lot more investment in the capital needs. And I want to, on behalf of the board, also say we are open and want to be transparent. So when there are questions and there are concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to me and get the right people in the right place so we can have the conversation. The only way this works is if both of us have faith that we're going to be able to do what we need to do with the funds that are being expended. And I want to be the partner that shows, yes, this is it. Ask me the questions. We can find the answers. We're going to figure it out. Because our students, as y'all have already lifted up, deserve that, right? Our students deserve us working together to figure this thing out. And I'd add, we might want to, do a joint visit to the legislator in this short session to talk about this $7 million that's legislated, which is really good, but also know our state should be covering some of these needs that we have. And so I would love to figure out what that advocacy could look like together as well. Because if all 50 are in that meeting, all counties are dealing with this issue, we know that this is something that the state needs to be working on as well. So just thank you all again for your work.
Thank you so much. I know we're over time on this. I do appreciate everybody for sitting back. I hope people are having the conversations. I know we have some upcoming meetings, and we are going to move forward with cooperative extension. Thank you so much, Superintendent Moore. And I will be handing the reins over to Commissioner Carter. Thank you so much for so graciously taking over. I appreciate you. Come on down, Donna.
It was nice of you to offer, Vice Chair Burns.
Listen, everybody gets to be in leadership this year. Everybody.
And good luck with your sister. All righty. So that brings us to the cooperative extension budget discussion, and we have Donna Rewalt and Maytal Barak with us, and really look forward to hearing from you.
And yes, you do have us with us. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today we will be sharing the requested budget updates, in particular within cooperative extension for early childhood and food security. Though if you have any questions about the budget or reductions for any other cooperative extension areas, I will be happy to address any of those during the discussion afterwards. Of course, we have Maytal Barak, our early childhood coordinator. She will share the early childhood, and I will share on food security. While our new food security coordinator, fresh off World Hunger Day yesterday, flew to D.C. today to attend the Anti-Hunger Policy Conference this week, and we're really excited that she could attend that. But we're going to formally introduce her to all of you at an upcoming board meeting, and that, of course, is Raina Goldstein-Banag. So we're really excited to have her on board. I am very excited to have her on board. We would like to begin, though, by thanking each of you and County Manager Sowell for your leadership and your vision. You support families with young children, and you think about feeding the people who are most in need of being fed, but also making changes that are systemic and long-term in nature, and your support and leadership in those areas is just tremendous and really appreciated. We also respect and understand that there are difficult choices that must be made this year, and we appreciate your work and leadership, as well as leadership of our budget team to lead us through this process. So with that spirit, we are here. So I'll let Maytal dive in and just push the button there.
Thank you. Thank you all. Excited to be here today, and I echo Donna's words of gratitude for your vision and bold support for our youngest residents. In terms of systems, I wanted us to start with this space. You all have enabled Durham County to have the foundation for this ecosystem. We have a robust early childhood system of care for children and their families in our county because of your commitment and funding, ensuring that these programs and services are available to our community. Especially throughout the years, you have supported the nonprofit sector and community-based, community-rooted partners that are focusing on helping families in our community. You can see in this graph, institutional, community, nonprofit, and parent partners are part of this ecosystem, as well as county staff in public health and social services, the cooperative extension, of course, and our libraries that are continuously engaged with families in this space. One of our biggest and most proud moments was our Early Child Action Plan. As you know, Durham County was the first adopter in developing this plan alongside community leaders. And the 5 to Thrive, as we call the key priority areas for this work, was the result of 3 years of planning, and now we're on to implementing these recommendations around welcoming spaces and cash assistance, and I'll get into that in a minute because DECO Thrives is part of the work that now the county is leading in our community. Childcare campaign and advocacy, as well as inclusive approaches to childcare and social and emotional health for our children and families. I would like to highlight as well that there was an update to the North Carolina Early Child Action Plan that came out in March, and some of those goals are also aligned with our 5 to Thrive that are locally happening in our community, which is wonderful. So as part of implementation that has been happening in the past year, we have been able to reconvene community leaders who led the Guaranteed Income Pilot Report as part of our Early Child Action Plan. And we have ensured a long-term engagement with our DECO Thrive to provide the guidance for that program that is soon to roll out, hopefully this summer. We are excited to continue to be part of that conversation. We have been able to host several childcare and professionals around advocacy for the work that is happening in our community, as well as providing support for community-rooted groups that are creating these safe spaces. As you all know, a couple of months ago, unfortunately, we received some threats in our community library, in our county library, during our Rainbow Storytime. And Rainbow Collective for Change is one of the nonprofits that we support through the Early Childhood Office to ensure that our children and families continue to feel safe in our community. Our early childhood investments for this year, as we've just mentioned, are the implementation for our Early Childhood Action Plan, as well as operating funds for the Early Childhood Office. The nonprofit investments have been huge in the past year around infant and maternal health, with MAME and Hearts leading that work in our community and supporting our Black and Brown parents and birthing people, as well as Refugee Community Partnership, supporting our refugee and migrant communities, especially around language justice work. The Diaper Bank, of course, is another recipient of the funding and supports we provide, and other early childhood nonprofits that work around early literacy in our community, like Read, Chart, and Read and Book Harvest. With the proposed budget, we are seeing a big reduction this year of 50%, and that, of course, will impact all of the nonprofit work that I just mentioned, with that line being removed. It will also limit some of the support with these community-based organizations. I mentioned before with Book Harvest and Read, Chart, and Read, the story times, the distribution of books, and ready for school supports that they provide to our community. as well as the work that Rainbow Collective for Change leads in our community, providing workshops for educators and family. Sorry, did we want to add anything, Donna?
Yeah, and I think so we have a slight reprieve because between myself and David and our copious emailing this weekend, we discovered what I would term as a mistake.
A mistake.
It's a mistake.
The budget office made a mistake.
Yes.
And
So
I wanted to
we'll
bring
offer
this
this.
to your attention. We strive for near perfection. And what happened in this case is we had identified some funding that was in last year's budget as one-time funding, which is different than recurring, right? We had identified it as just needed this last year. So as part of our work through this year's budget, we reduced $107,500 that actually was recurring funding, was basically intended to stay in cooperative extension or early childhood's budget. This happens every year. We always have these relatively minor. So what we're proposing at this point, and I've talked through with Donna and Keith, is to put on the ad delete list $107,500 to restore that recurring funding. It's the Board of Commissioners' prerogative, if you will, because it's your budget at this point, but it's basically an administrative error that we are putting in place to fix. That would then lead to, instead of a 50% reduction, a 16% reduction in operating budget, which may still be significant. I'm not going to get into that, but it's not the 50% that unfortunately we put forward as part of the manager's recommended budget.
And if it helps, that would bring that money back to ECAP implementation. So that's kind of where that left. It would still leave the remaining part that's been cut, the 16% would be cut directly from those nonprofit, is directly cut from the county nonprofit program line. You may remember at some point a couple of years ago, different departments were assigned buckets of the county nonprofit program funds, and that's just that amount of money there.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? Are any of the ones that are not getting the county nonprofit funding getting funding through the ARPA funds?
Yes. I believe, and Claudia and I will reconvene around this. I believe Retard and Reed is one example of recipients of ARPA.
They are receiving ARPA.
Through,
yeah. But we can double check and.
I think they're in a slightly different, they're in a general funding line within early childhood. They are not part of, the ones that are in the county nonprofit program are the ones that were listed on the previous slide, Mom May Hearts, Refugee Community Partnership, and the Diaper Bank. So those are directly affiliated historically with the county nonprofit program. So that's the line that was removed. I mean, some of this is we'll have to go back and look once we know what the bottom line is. It's kind of reassessing what's priority. That's like
53,000.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, I think what's key is we want to make sure that, I mean, if something's getting funded through ARPA, then they'll be okay for the next 2 years. But we want to make sure that if they aren't, that we don't want to cut somebody totally out that hasn't been funded. So that, I guess, that would be good for us to know.
Yeah, and I would say too, like the Diaper Bank, for example, we are the largest distributor. Durham County, through the Welcome Baby Program, is the largest distributor of diapers in the state for the Diaper Bank. So a point of pride, but also a real partnership there that's represented in those funds.
And just to finish, I want to again reiterate my gratitude to all of you doing this very hard work, especially during this season, and highlight also the collaboration that Donna just mentioned with the budget office. And again, looking forward to our collaboration with Eco Thrives. I think that's the way that we can move forward the work for our children and families. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to take a brief tour of, let's see, the world of food security. I think you all know some of this data well, but it's always good to kind of start with where we kind of live, and that is with, again, kind of an overall 12% food insecurity rate in Durham, but we know this significantly disproportionately impacts Black and brown families, and particularly our children, with a 20% rate, and also a little bit more older adults as well, and that's a group we've really been challenged by. We know from our community health assessment that we have families who reflect a greater percentage than even those official food insecurity rates of skipping meals or being concerned about being able to afford a meal or choosing not to eat in order to save funds. We also know nationally the picture hasn't gotten any prettier, and I think we know this intuitively. Food insecurity has increased for Americans in recent years, with families with children most significantly impacted. I think we know that there's these economic impacts from COVID. The recently decreased federal assistance has certainly been a part of this. And just simply the increased food and housing costs, I think we probably individually in this room even notice that in our own budgets, and certainly when you're on the margin, you notice it even more. Kind of looking forward, we're paying very close attention to the Farm Bill, and a lot of people forget the Farm Bill is where SNAP lives. And that's where this food assistance, that is the largest assistance program that we can offer our families. And we are actually looking at strategies to get more families involved. But the Farm Bill, there's some scary conversations that are happening at the federal level where we really want to advocate strongly around those SNAP benefits. COVID assistance to communities, of course, ending. We know that even when ARPA ends in a few years, thinking ahead to that. In our continued housing crisis. So there are just some things that are here that are going to cause some ongoing food insecurity challenges as they cause economic security challenges. Our response to this has been kind of two-pronged. One is very simply to enhance the social safety net to meet current needs, that kind of charitable food, let's fill in that gap. But we want to do more than that, and so the other prong of that approach for the county has been to work toward equitable systemic change to improve our long-term food security. And so even when we do charitable food work, we pair that with some longer-term strategies. But there is a lot to celebrate. I do appreciate that some of you were able to be with us at World Hunger Day, and I know some of you wished you could be with us at World Hunger Day. It was a beautiful day outside. We had a lot of families in attendance. We had some wonderful community partners giving away fresh produce and just a whole bunch of wonderful community collaboration celebration. So there is a lot to celebrate in terms of the progress we've made. We have this wonderful county food security network of people who come together, and that was in force yesterday for sure. We have some wonderful opportunities and investments where we just talked about where we'll talk about managing grants and contracts that meet urgent food needs. We've definitely started to leverage county resources for looking at outside funding. And we are definitely starting to contribute to regional efforts. We know that Durham couldn't feed itself, right? If something happened, we are never going to be able to provide all the food that this community needs within the county. So we've got to look in a regional basis, and we've started to do that as well. So we're really excited about the directions that we're going in. Okay, so taking a quick snapshot at where we are right now in food security. We provide some targeted nonprofit support to meet some of our most pressing needs. We focus those dollars in ways that are addressing specific community areas by geography or particular groups. We also are trying to, one of the biggest challenges we have is around the home-delivered meals and home-delivered food piece for people who are unable to access food outside of their homes easily. And so we've certainly made investments in nonprofits and with partners to try to address that. And we see that as an ongoing challenge. We have certainly used these funds to coordinate and collaborate our local food security efforts with our county food security network. We still have on the books the local food system assessment and plan, which I want to update you on. It is in the RFP process. We are not going to get to contract by June 30, so it will move into the next fiscal year. We're going to roll those funds over. Part of this was that we didn't want to put that on top of the farm campus assessment. That's a little bit much for a community to absorb, even though when we're talking about a food system assessment, we're really talking about from growing to eating and everything in between, suppliers, all of that. So that will cover a much broader and deeper well of information. I think that is going to help inform us for many years to come. So we look forward to having that launch. I know we've been waiting for it, and I'm excited that it's coming. Also, our regional food system support, and we're hoping that there will be some movements there that we can talk about in more detail. And of course, our World Hunger Day event and operating funds for the Food Security Office. Of course, the USDA Farm Campus Grant lives in this space as well, and that isn't really affected so much by the budget, but that is also part of the work that we've done through the budget. I will note that our nonprofit support that I mentioned here is a combination of the Durham County nonprofit program funds and then also some targeted investments just from the Food Security Fund Center. So it's a combination of both of those things. So for next year, this has some notes. Oh, let's see. Oh, and we have ARPA. I did want to mention ARPA funds. Do not want to forget those because we do have some really awesome things that you all have decided to do, which are funded through ARPA. And one is our community food security grant. So that is actually, we submitted the vendor. We've been through the RFP process. We should be bringing a contract forward to you all soon for that. That's about $520,000. And that's our larger grants. You might have noticed on the earlier slide, we have the micro grants, kind of those small organizations that need $500 or $1,000. This is much more larger grants that also have some maybe capital aspects to them. They may have some systemic approaches involved in those grants. So it's a larger kind of grant. And so the vendor for that will be bringing to you soon. Our East Durham Groceries, or our community accountable grocery pilot, and that is underway. If you haven't been out to East Durham to check that out, I would encourage you to go. And then, of course, the support that you all decided on last year after the benefits cut, the benefits cliff in 2023, that we're sending through the Interfaith Food Shuttle and the Food Bank of North Carolina. That's going very well. Some of the things we built into that on the systemic side were things like surveying and talking with the food pantries and the food service organizations so that we learn more about what we're doing, what is needed, and we make sure that those are the types of resources that are targeted. So the pantries themselves were also able to tell the food bank and the food shuttle what are the kinds of things their folks need in the community. And you can imagine a lot of it was about fresh food. So our proposed food security budget this year, so after our food security budget, we've gone through this process. There's a 35% reduction in operating funds of $149,000. That 50% of that is a 50% reduction to the county nonprofit program funds. So that's approximately $88,000 of that. The rest of it are general food security funds, and so that will just mean, we've been talking about the choices that we could make if those reductions stay. That could obviously include reducing, and would include certainly reducing targeted support for community needs through nonprofit partners. We might have to change the World Hunger Day event. We may not be able to do a larger scale event, or reducing some of our support for a regional food initiative. So we have, kind of a menu of choices we've been looking at. We have some strategies in mind if this is the reduction that stays within the center. But this is kind of where we're thinking and what's happening right now. We have some additional commitments for FY25 as well. We did slate a portion of the livestock agent services that we're now able to provide to our farmers in Durham County to come out of food security, because that is very integral to food security. And we wanted to do a little bit more with our regional partnership. And of course, this is kind of our foundation for some of our farm campus work. We'll of course be working through the capital process that you all already have in the budget. That will move that work forward on the capital side, but we may be looking in some other ways at small grants and some things that we can start to do to move the needle on farm campus. So that is kind of where we are with the food security budget, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
I do want to add that you have some supplemental slides for Durham Pre-K. Dr. Chappelle presented beautifully last week, so there's just added information there as well.
Great. It's wonderful to have those slides, and thank you very much for your presentation. You are a mighty department, small and mighty. And frankly, I think that your work centers on some of the board's top priority areas. So thank you for that. Now, just see who would like to start with questions. Brenda, Wendy?
I just have a quick one.
Okay.
So thank you. As Heidi just said, mighty, but you do a lot. Small, but you do a lot. I had the question about aftercare. Can you tell me where that is? The aftercare conversation
Oh, the
that we
aftercare
had?
conversation, yes.
Yeah.
And I know I owe you an email on that. Commissioner Howerton. Yes, the researcher has been ill, so that actually we were hoping to bring that to you in June at probably what would have been today's work session, and I've asked if we will be able to bring that back to you in July. So I'm waiting to hear back from that. So we're ready to talk about it. There have also been some additional movement from North Carolina State where they have gotten some additional funding. So what might be needed in order for us to participate in the study would not be as great. So this is the.
Could you share a little bit more
I can
so
share
the
a bit
board
more.
knows what we're talking about?
Yes. So this is the aftercare study that Wake County is participating in, and that is happening through North Carolina State, through one of their extension professors in this field, and they are looking at what happens with children in out-of-school time. So that's before school, after school. We've had a lot of concern in our community, both Commissioner Howerton and myself, probably some of you have been approached by families around what the gaps are. And it may be some of them are gaps maybe they perceive the school system has, the community has. We need to know more about what those gaps are in order to begin to address them and to look at what might be needed. And this study also includes some mapping aspects to it where we would locate also the existing resources. So it involves a component both of interviewing and surveying parents and what their experiences are and what their needs are, and consequently also interviewing and surveying the provider, so we actually get data from the providers in terms of their capacities, interests, and focus too. So it's a really neat study, and it would be easy for us to kind of join in on that in a fairly kind of low-cost way. It's just been getting our things aligned to be able to bring Dr. Sankar to you to have that conversation. I mean, I can present it, but she does a much better job.
Well, thank you for following up on that, and I look forward to hear more about, because if they were, she was doing such a great job for Wake County. Just for us to tap into that, I think would save us a lot of money rather than going out and getting our own consultant. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say yes, yes, yes. We should definitely join in the study. And I have full confidence if anything is going to be done through cooperative extension, I know it's going to be done well. But, just all of the ways that you meet people where they are in the community, and, it would just, but we have to, we've got to understand what are the resources. I mean, I actually asked for this to be on the agenda for our joint city-county meeting on Wednesday. I don't know if it will be, but we have to understand what are the resources that we do have, first of all, and what the need is for, actually in your packet that you gave us, that Keith sent out, Linda, which actually showed how many children we have in each age group in Durham and what percentage have working parents. Like, I've never even seen that data before. So, we have to even first understand what the resources are, what the gaps, and then a real coordinated strategy between the city and the county to make sure all of our kids are engaged. I mean, I know, Commissioner Howerton talks about this a lot, but this is how we are going to address, keeping our kids out of joining gangs and getting shot. I mean, seriously. So, yes, I mean, whatever. Just tell us what we need to do.
Okay. You don't even need a presentation. We'll bring it back. I'll make sure we bring it back to you in one form or another. Yeah.
So I'm really concerned about these cuts for early childhood budget and the food security, because this is something that our board has invested in, having these cross-system approach to both of these issues, and investing in having coordinators. And so I want to make sure when I see that, so I hear the recommendation from staff about budget staff, David said, about putting at least 107.5 back in, and then us understanding if there's anything that's not getting ARPA funding that we want to keep supporting. But then with food security, saying that we're not going to have, can you go back to that slide? Yeah, we want
I
to make
didn't say for sure what we would
Okay,
and wouldn't
but-
have. Let's see. Can I go
All right,
backwards?
well,
Let's see.
I just want to make sure we're not gonna,
Okay.
yeah.
Let me just say, and
Yes.
of course, we're fine with you all voting to put it back in. But what we're
The other
saying
way.
is departments have the ability to be flexible in their budgets and where we can move and shift things. If we don't want to cut anything out of that budget, of course, we can put it back in. But doesn't want it to look like that we said we are cutting food security programs. That is not what we're saying. We will work out what the priorities are, and certainly if you want to put the funds back in there, we can. We just felt like we didn't want to pick and choose. There are some departments we know that are mission critical and that are, first responder related. Those we have to keep intact, but we didn't want to pick and choose which departments don't get cut, because all of our departments, of course, we would prefer to keep funding at the same level for all of our departments. So certainly understand your concerns.
Yeah.
And you all direct us in how you would like for us to move. But we don't, if you don't restore the funding, we can find a way to make sure we can still cover some of those critical needs that you want to make sure we cover.
Well, I feel very concerned about the reductions too. I mean, I was thinking back to our budget retreat, and I think we're supposed to list priorities as commissioners, and I think my only priority was the early childhood years. And boy, I wish I'd brought what I wrote down, because it was very eloquent. Now I don't remember what I said, but basically, I want us here again to be known for our support in the early years of children and families, and I want us to be known for serving the best food to all people from an equitable, environmentally sustainable food system. And so that's what this work does. And the budgets are relatively small.
So this is actually, so we had two versions of these slides, and I think, Monica, somehow we just walked through one version, and then now an old version has popped up. So,
well, the other thing I was curious about was, we asked our departments to submit 5%, 10% reduction scenarios.
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere in answers that were coming back to Wendy's questions, which were great, by the way, Wendy. Thank you for compiling those very thoughtful questions. I've appreciated reading the information that's come forward from our amazing budget team. But one of the pieces of information was, we asked for these reductions, but we really have reduced spending $1 million.
Yes.
So, this is a
Yes.
big chunk of that $1 million, it feels like.
Yes.
So
the total amount that we would have, the 10% totaled 1.7 million, I think. So we didn't go as far as the 10% cut, but we did go to 1 million. Keith, you can elaborate.
And I think, the rest of the fund centers in our department took 10%. So we're 10% across the board, except for these two. And it's pain, and, even the 10% for us is painful, because, small stuff.
That's right.
Tends to hurt a little more.
Everyone needs to pause on using 10% and 5%. Those were scenarios that were requested by the manager. Yes. That is not what was cut. 10% would have been a $9 million cut. We didn't cut. We reduced $1 million. So we're not even in the ballpark of 5% reductions of operational, closer to 1%. However, it is the second year in a row that we have asked departments and found operating reductions. That is a whole nother story about how many years you can continue to cut operational budgets, even by small amounts. I hear you,
and ours are 10%.
But I do want to be clear, 10% is not even on the board as of what actually happened to any department, including cooperative.
Keith, actually, our lines, I think, are cut by 10%. Our lines are cut by 10%. Yes.
Some might be cut by 10%.
But overall, right.
Overall, they are. Each one is still cut by 10. I'd be, yeah. Yeah, I'm just.
So
anyway,
let's take a look at that.
Yes, please take a look.
Let's take a look at that.
And
because that was not the intent. So we'll take a look
I mean,
at that.
if across the county organization it's closer to, let's say 2%, which is more than it is. In the cooperative extension, line items were cut 10% or 35%, you know.
The budget book says it's an overall 25% reduction for cooperative extension.
Okay.
So the math.
Yeah,
works out.
that feels bad to me.
So that was an estimate we were making in a previous version of this slide, where we were trying to give a little bit more context for how we would reduce. And ultimately, like if you spread the cut across those different sources, we would probably have to, because as a department director, I still have to protect training and those kinds of other things. So I have to think about what we would spend the remaining money on. And so I have to spend it on, kind of staff and certain things before I send it out to the community. So that just might shift a 50% reduction a little bit in a different direction. So we were kind of ballparking a scenario. I had pulled that out. And the slide that I showed you during the presentation a few minutes ago was a different slide. So I have no idea what magic happened here today. But the one you have that's attached to the agenda just talks about the very specific 50% reduction in the nonprofit funds that was on the line item.
Well, one reason investment in these areas I think also makes sense is we have very solid community-developed programs. The Early Childhood Action Plan and lots of strategy around food security as well that derives from the work of a coalition of community partners and players. And both of these topic areas during the past 8 years have risen to the top as priorities, for this board. And I don't feel like that's changed any. Yes? No? It hasn't changed. You're looking at your phone.
Well, Commissioner Carter's like, I need a response.
So that was not a rhetorical question.
Okay, good. So I hear you
Okay.
that this is an important priority that we want to protect.
Yes, I would say that is well said.
Gotcha.
So well.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, with that, then I think that probably concludes this agenda item. Do you have any further comments for us today?
No, just thank you. Apologies for the confusion on the slides here. But no, we just appreciate your thoughtfulness and your work. And, we are really great at making do in cooperative extension, and we will do that. We will look for funds. We will.
And you do anyway.
We'll make our own food. We will. We'll do whatever we need to do.
You just got that Duke Endowment grant, right?
Yeah, we did do that. So we're good at looking for money, so we will do that as well. So we always are looking for opportunities, and we will respond to whatever the need is in the county. We do understand the challenges, and we thank you.
All right. Thank you both so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So we have one more topic and then board discussion that will not last 90 minutes, I'm sure. Right, good point. And so next we have the CIP process update, a very, very important agenda item. Hi, buddy. And we'll pause for a minute for water.
Yes. I love those chairs.
I should know how to use this. Good afternoon. We will share some highlights on the capital improvement process, and I will kick it off and pass it over to my colleagues, Julio and Perry. We'll give quick overview, and the main crux of the conversation is to talk about guiding principles as the board thinks about how to proceed. And we'll talk a little bit about timeline. As you know, these We have these slides, the importance of capital planning and those elements. They are essential. Your board policy and your financial model sets a framework for that. It's a multi-year process, as you know, up to 10 years. There's a prioritization process involved. There's strong emphasis on timing. And there's the whole issue of how you pay for all of it. There are more opportunities for projects than there are funds, and there's lots of iterative processes as we look at how we fund it, whether it's pay as you go or if we're borrowing the dollars. But throughout the process, we try to make sure we strike the right balance, and we refine it often. We try to make sure we utilize dedicated capital-only resources, and our affordability modeling, which is our capital finance plan, helps us to pay for the long-term debt associated with it. We try to make sure there's a separation of operating and capital resources, and sometimes we do a better job than others with that. We'll bring on buildings, and then we need to make sure we have the resources to support it. And so that's a part of it as well. So we'll not go into all the other components, but this is another familiar slide. The key steps, the needs assessment, prioritization, sequencing, evaluating affordability, and then ultimately you update that plan. Here's a draft calendar. Again, draft is real important. There were initial requests for CIP projects back in the fall and some refinement early winter. The board had a policy conversation about CIP, and as you may recall, conversations on the projects, and ACM Delgado and Perry will sort of bring you back to some of those highlights there. Today's conversation will talk about the framing and guiding principles. The hope is to get your feedback on that process from now through July. And then when we come back in August, this is again all draft, hopefully giving you some initial updates about the projects. Hoping that if the board, as you refine process, there is we can come back in September with some preliminary discussions, with some additional recommendations early October, and hopeful that our FA can also look at what we've put forth. Affordability and sequencing of projects go hand in hand, but we always have our FA vetted with us as we try to figure out, well, how do we cover this and what does it do to our rating? And then the ultimate goal of having some preliminary capital improvement projects for the board to look like early November, with hopeful some adoption in November, at the November 11th meeting. Now, this is very aggressive and ambitious. I'm sure Keith is back there like, oh my goodness. I'm sure he is. I don't even see it, but I feel it in the back. I feel it. Feel it in the back of my head. But so this is very aggressive, and but we know we need to move with intentionality. I know there's a desire to look at a referendum in 2026, so we need to have that locked up in 2025, and so these parts move fast, and for some of us on the financing side that have to have these conversations with the LGC and others, we also recognize what's involved on the other parts of this. And so I'm going to turn it now to the most important part of the conversation, which is the guiding principles, and just talking about what that looks like as we refine our framework and get it done.
Thank you, Ms. Claudia. ACM Delgado here. If you recall, back in November 23rd, we had a retreat, and we spoke about guiding principles for CIP. And to me, I mean, just throughout the last few weeks for budget discussions, especially today, CIP is becoming, it should be at the top of our thinking, okay? Looking for data-driven decisions, scope, doing analysis, return of investments, all those things, right? I've spoken to Keith the other day, and when you have money, it's okay. But when you don't have money, you have to make smart decisions. So, in front of you, you should have two documents. The first one is the guiding principles that we discussed. Today, what I really want to concentrate is, come on, push. That's something that we discussed back in November. But the second part, okay, is how do we take guiding principles and make it a policy? Step by step, how do we evaluate, look at CIP, look at how we spend money, okay? How do we measure? What metrics do we use, okay? Again, this is a draft. This is a work in progress. Thanks to the team for their assistance. We've been doing a lot of research to see how other cities and counties are doing it. It could be done, okay? It could be done. It just takes a lot of teamwork, a lot of effort, a lot of intentional actions, okay? So, again, the purpose is on the slide. One area that I am proposing, or we are proposing, is creating a capital improvement program review and advisory committee, okay, for future CIP projects. So before a project comes to the commissioners, you have a committee that looks at all the details, okay, the needs, the wants, how much it's going to cost, the timetable, all those things. That way, when you have to make a decision, everything is there, okay? The homework was done, okay? The second part is something that we are proposing is define the CIP process by assets. We are talking about new buildings, about libraries. How are we going to measure? Because every asset is going to have a different metric. Okay? Do we need it now? Can it wait? Okay? Claudia was nice enough yesterday to send me a reminder. 45% of the money that we get, we spend it on the school CIP or some type of. So getting with the schools to see how we link on the CIP process. That way there's no, surprise. Okay? So I think the money you mentioned something about having those meetings, and I'm so glad to hear that because we all should be in the same boat.
So when we are talking about this today and with your presentations to us today, can we assume that when we say the CIP process, we are really referring to an integrated process of our capital needs as a county and also DPS's capital needs, that we're thinking about this holistically, or is it two separate parallel processes, which is more what I feel like it has been in the past? Which one is it?
Was that Claudia? If you could respond to that.
And I'm going to say both and.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we are going to have separate conversations with them. But then once we are all agreed upon, what the best approach should be, then when we present it to you, I feel like we should present the county projects as well as the schools projects for you to see.
So when we're thinking about funding and when we're thinking about our ability to take on debt, we have to think about it all.
Yeah, it's integrated.
Yeah.
The challenge is often syncing up processes. So, for instance, if you may recall, a couple of years ago when we were planning for the bond referendum, we had already finished our facility master plan update, and Keith can correct me if I'm not right, but we had finished ours. They were in process. They finished in the fall, so we adopted it in 1 year, and then we adopted it again the next year because of syncing up the timing. And so it may take us a while to get synced up, but I know working towards something that is more formal and owned by both governing bodies will help us, because it makes it difficult for us who are facilitating conversations. Well, how do you pay for this? And so, but it is as Dr. Sowell said, both ways.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Again, I'm new to the county, but I think about it this way. It's the same money. Okay? It's the same money. So just move money from the left pocket to the right pocket is still the same money. How to best use that money, okay, and get the results that we need to get the results. The last part that I would like to touch briefly is we have 20, how many projects do we have on CIPs?
That's right. We got 12,
13 active projects. So how do we decide which one is going to be first? Because not everything could be first. We don't have enough money to do everything at the same time. Matter of fact, even if we have the money, it would not make sense because you're not going to be able to finish in time. I mean, it's going to be too much. So how do we say this project is going to be first? Okay, and that's the decision you will make, the commissioners. If you look from the bottom on the page of the big pamphlet, well, we are drawing a table, okay, where we are dividing the factors and the assets that we have. Okay, the committee will get together with the metrics and go one by one. Okay, it's a lot of reading, and my apologies. By the time we finished, it was too late, and that's why we decided to make copies for it. But it's a lot of detail on this, and this is work in progress. Again, the intent is to bring something to the board that is our suggestions. Okay, listening to the public, getting to the input from the commissioners, from the manager, from the new strategic plan that we're going to develop. Okay, how we're going to approach these projects. Does that make sense? I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Okay. The whole chart, in order to understand the chart, you got to read the page.
Maybe that's why. I don't
Right.
get it yet.
Right. I didn't,
You mentioned it, and I thought it was really
no, and
relevant
that's why,
to what you were telling us.
No. It's what we did, or the research that we did was to look for each asset, okay, and figure out, okay, what is important on that asset to be a CIP. Okay, so imagine that you're going to do groceries and you say, okay, what do I need first? Are you going to go by price, urgency? I mean, like, if a project doesn't have anything on energy conservation, that project should not come to the board. Every project that comes to the board should have something on energy conservation. Okay? If the project doesn't have money assigned or funded, that's a discussion that we should have. So again, in order for you to understand the chart, you have to read the whole package.
Okay.
Which would make it more difficult at this time of the day.
Sure. Let's move forward.
Yes. So that's it.
So good afternoon, commissioners. I do want to say that I kind of look at this as, one, we have a track and great idea to adopt a policy, a process, create the committee. But just like we talked about earlier today at the work session when we actually discussed the Emergency Operations Center, there are going to be a few projects that sort of are one-offs or things that drive us to sort of act a little faster to deliver those projects. And there are a few that I want to just highlight to you so you can be thinking about those when you're reading the document and sort of how the policy sort of impacts those projects. So we have a new issue that has surfaced, the EMS Fleet Maintenance Garage over on Stone Park Creek. You guys know that that property was bought by NC Railroad, and they have directed us that we have to be out of there by January 2025, which means we don't have anywhere to service our EMS ambulatory fleet. And so that's one that has surfaced as a priority. So what we're doing is we're looking at evaluating properties that the county owns, i.e. the Seaton Road fire station that we got back from the city. We're also looking at what's available on the market, and we're having conversations with Motrillo, Julio, Emergency Management, EMS, and others. We'll make a decision about how we sort of move forward based on, what makes sense, what's the most economical thing for us to do right now. There are a few others that are in the same category that I'm calling top priorities. One of them is the Justice Services Department's transition house. We have ARPA dollars associated with that. There was a $500,000 ARPA set aside that we have to have that funding encumbered by the end of December 2024. So we need to be moving forward with that. Another one, we can look at it how you want to, but every time that Preserve Rural Durham comes up here, they talk about the lack of public safety service delivery in East Durham. We have been in discussions with the city for some time now about a fire and EMS co-location on city-owned property on Kemp Road. That is a top priority for both the city and the county, and we're trying to align our CIPs up such that they fit for both organizations. And so just keep that in mind. And there are a few other projects that were approved in the 2020 CIP that we're starting to lose traction on that we need to keep moving. Certainly, I don't want to bog it down, but the sheriff's training facility, that's a project you all know. We did several land acquisitions associated with that one. We can have an offline conversation about how you guys want to move forward, but we were ready to actually bid that project, and we were kind of the brakes were put on us. So just keep that in mind. The city and the county are also moving forward with Fire and EMS 19. That is going to be the co-location to serve RTP at the intersection of 54 and Davis Drive. There are a few other projects. I know the board has interest in things. We certainly can talk about those. Commissioner Jacobs, you've mentioned the animal shelter multiple times.
I'd like to second that.
Yeah, the fleet maintenance facility is a new one that's out there, but I mention that because that's going to be sited adjacent to the animal shelter out at Junction Road. So if we move forward with the animal shelter, it makes sense to put in a utility infrastructure for the fleet maintenance facility, just taking advantage of the economics there. And then there are some studies that we're doing that absolutely make sense. We're getting ready to update the county's space needs analysis and facility master plan. We're doing an update to the EMS long-range space plan in alignment with the city to continue the co-location model and make sure that we're, providing service delivery in tandem with that group. And we're also doing a regional library master plan update. And another project that I've talked to upper management about is we're doing a space management efficiency improvements in on-call services. What we're doing is we're taking a post-pandemic look, a post-pandemic assessment of the county's space and how we're utilizing it and see if we can, just be more efficient, because it's not all about building new projects. It's also about being wise with what you have. And so that's a project where we've done an RFQ. We're waiting on a proposal from a consultant that's going to help us with that. And so that will be coming to you sometime in the near future. So that's just my list of projects that you can certainly think about as you think about how the policy impacts, those. So,
just don't forget, there's a $3 million EPA grant in order to renovate the convenience site at Roxborough.
Okay.
That'll be coming to you.
See, do not get into a discussion about the CIP.
Commissioner Howerton has a question.
Yes, go ahead.
What's the conversation around the fire station that the citizens have been asking about for quite some time, EMS or fire station?
Yes, ma'am. That's the one I mentioned. We're calling that, in the CIP, it's called the Far East Station.
Okay.
But it's actually the fire and EMS co-location that we're going to put on Kemp Road
Okay.
That's city-owned property. The city and county have been in discussions for some time now.
So you
And-
got a fancier name for it than I do.
Yes, ma'am. But yes, absolutely. We know it's high on your list.
Okay.
We hear the citizens, and so we're ahead of it. So
Okay.
it's a top priority for both the city and the county.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And Commissioner Jacobs has questions, comments?
Thank you, Julio, and I look forward to reading this. Definitely need to have a policy and a rubric and all that. Thank you so much. Just thinking about what you were just listing, Perry, first of all, I want to say about Kemp Road, how much money has the city asked from developers when they've been doing their rezonings in that area to go towards the EMS station? How much do we have in that pot of money?
Commissioner, you know I can't answer that question.
Yes, because the answer is zero.
Yeah.
The answer is zero. So
That is not for him to answer.
yeah, I know. So we really have to deal. We have to address that. That is, that's very frustrating to me. Okay. So two things. One, I want to respond about Project Build. I know we got information back from Keith. We definitely need to move forward with Project Build. They have been operating out of the basement of the Justice Services Center, and so I'm sorry if anything I did interfered with that part of things, because that needs to. So please bring that part back to us ASAP. Those people, they work so hard, they do such a good job, and they need to get their space renovated and relocated over there. So I just want to be clear about that's my position on that.
I'm glad to hear that. As you could tell, we're scared to touch it since what happened.
Okay,
but,
sorry.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't realize our unintended consequences.
But we're going to package it all together and bring it to you, but thank you for noting that.
Well, I don't want that to be part of the former Boys and Girls Club. I think that needs to be separated out.
It will be.
Yeah, and then animal shelter, I really want to move forward with the animal shelter, and so especially before Heidi leaves this board. She has worked so hard as a liaison to that board.
I
and
attend the meetings.
we are
I try
going
to be a good advocate.
We are going to do it in honor of Heidi.
Oh, great. Does that have to be my legacy?
Yeah, so I want to know how we can, because, we can chew gum and walk and talk at the same time. So I do want to know how we can move forward with that. And yes, if we're going to be doing something at our Junction Road site, then that makes sense to look at, planning for what else needs to go there. So I'll just say that those, and the Justice Services transition home, we should definitely move forward with that if that's going to be funded with ARPA funding.
A small portion, 500,000.
Oh, it won't cover the whole thing.
It won't cover.
Oh, okay. All right, but that's still really important. It's still really important.
Look, she is doing what I was hoping we didn't do, but okay.
Okay, sorry.
We will allow you. If I can, though, ask DCM Hager to go back to the timeline, because I heard you say, you want us to move forward on certain
whenever
things.
you need to bring it back to us, but I'm just giving feedback. But yeah.
Can we wait until August, because that's what we're looking
that's fine.
to do? Okay.
Well, maybe not on I see his face. Not on.
Remember, we have a deadline to have the ARPA funding encumbered by December 2024.
Yeah. Not the ARPA project. I'm just saying bringing back, because, rightly so, Commissioner Jacobs is listing like, these are my top priorities.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay,
Transition
but
house.
Project Build, if you need to bring that back, we don't have to wait till August.
So that's what I wanted to wait until August to bring everything back, so that we're not cherry picking again. We want to honor the request of staff and look at how we can prioritize.
Okay.
We hear you. We hear you.
Okay.
Thank you all so much.
Because we'll get into, I want this, and I want this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, okay, I hear you. And Perry, I was really excited to hear about the plans that you said you were working on.
Yes, ma'am.
I missed, you said the library one, the post-pandemic space, the EMS, and what was the other one?
The library regional master plan
Right.
and just an update to the space needs. And now that's all
Right.
county departments, operational, administrative, storage, and parking
Okay.
needs. So, yes, ma'am.
So it was those three?
It's actually 4.
I missed the fourth.
EMS. Did you get EMS?
Okay, EMS,
Yeah,
library.
EMS, library, the space management efficiency, and then the overall update to the space needs assessment. Those are 2 different things.
Oh, okay.
And if
okay.
we have anything else, can we get it in there?
What's that now?
If we have something else, can we get it in there as well?
I think that goes against what the manager wanted to do, so, yeah.
Can we put something else?
Well, thank you so much for this presentation at a rather high level. I do think it's good not to go with the cherry-picking approach and look forward to the policy and the rubric to run our different projects through, and so see how they land in the priority list. And the timeline looks aggressive, but it looks feasible, so hopefully we'll be able to do that, to accomplish that. And also looking forward to a more comprehensive look at all of Durham County's needs together, including the schools, so that we know what the total cost is and we know what the total resource dollar figure is to address the cost. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And that brings us to board discussion. Is someone leading that?
We're going to ask the
David
budget
Keith,
team to come up.
budget
Yes.
team.
Dynamic duo.
I don't know how long this is going to last, but 5 o'clock I got to be out the door.
Yeah, I pretty much turn into a I think I'm already maybe a pumpkin. I already am a vegetable. That's right, we're pumpkins.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
There's no presentation. There's going to be the add-delete list. Let me say it clearly. Now the hard work begins. I hear vegetable states and people ready to go, but at some point all of this policy has to turn into numerical decisions so we can push towards an approved budget in theory on June the 10th. We have one more day tomorrow, half a day. The 4th was the reserve day. It is we have only one group coming to talk, and then we talk, but there's a lot to talk about numerically, and decisions need to be made, or a decision needs to be made to put off approving the budget till later in June, and then you can. I have to point out that is a possibility. If it's not one that I think we have confidence that the board will make decisions today and tomorrow to get us towards an approval of the budget, different than what is, or the same, that the manager's recommended. What we are showing right now, let's start at the top. Thank you, David's running it over there, so we'll be mixing between the two of us. We talked about the $107,000 we're adding back to cooperative extension for that mistake on our part of a cut to their budget for early childhood support. That's not costing the county anything. We have money in a reserve, and we can move from that reserve to pay for this. I mean, what is the reserve? Trying to get your hands on it already? I heard your interest perk up there. We reserve a little bit of money just in case we have mistakes over there. This isn't a massive amount of money, a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
It's not going to save the day, or whatever we define as saving the day. But it saved this from being additional funding. I just want to point out that this is paid for with the movement of those funds. But we have some big ticket items.
Heidi already knows you, so she already planned on the fact that you put something, you squirreled something.
You know, early on he said we had a little bit, and he said about 300,000 or something, but it was not much.
Several hundred
We've passed it. We've passed it.
All that being said, we still have some major decisions to move forward on. You heard on May the 30th from DTCC. They requested an additional $504,000. That would fully fund their full request of over $700,000. The manager's recommended budget is giving them $220,000. Most of that $500,000 is to pay for some upfit of some rental space. Remember, they have an office. But that's a decision you have to make to give them all that they requested, none, something in the middle. Durham Pre-K, there was an adjustment for $1 million, $1,015,000 for 2 additional credentialed classrooms. This is not the same, as far as I understand it, as the DPS Pre-K money. That's a different issue, and we can talk about that in a few minutes. But that's $1 million. I have it on the list as a potential add until you all make a decision. Then we can go through DPS, and here it gets a little complicated, but I'm going to ask you to follow through with me. What I have in red here, at least in the expenditure column, is everything that hasn't been yet funded in from the DPS request of $27.735 million versus the $12.95 million that the manager recommended. This is the difference kind of by grouping of area. We have not approved $8.8 million for DPS compensation study implementation. That study by itself with a 20% surcharge would mean another $1.776 million to pay for the $8.8 million. Commissioner Carter's getting me. Then we talk about the teacher salary supplement change as part of the Board of Education approved budget that was shown to you all at the last meeting. They added $1.39 million to their request that wasn't in the request that came to the manager's office. So that's an additional $1.39 million. That's for hard to fill positions, and that has a $278,000 surcharge to it. Then there is the DPS pre-K seats at Murray-Massenburg for $716,000. That would not be in their current expense funding, hopefully, if we figure out a way to pay for that. So that does not have 20% surcharge. And then the DPS also asked for $1.5 million in additional current capital funding. That current capital would be on top of the $6 million we give them annually. You heard the superintendent talk about that a number of times. That number would not be built into the per pupil amount, so you would not, a portion of it would not go to charter schools. You add all of those numbers up, and there was a rounding of 233. If you gave them everything, that would equal, that in those red, that would equal the $27.73 million request that they have asked for. Now we're going to go through, and then the final add I want to show you at the bottom so far is the Hayti Reborn. It's up to a $2 million increase that is up for discussion. Now, I also know that you all said that you were concerned about cooperative extension here, the last folks that were up here just a few minutes ago, and some additional funding for them. I'm not quite sure what we quantified as a number additional. I don't think I've added it up here yet. If there isn't, we will find out from them. Probably can go back to that secret reserve account that you aren't allowed to touch, but I am, and we can pay for that. Just kidding, but if it's $50,000 or $100,000 or
And we'll double check the ARPA funding. So for instance, Reach Out and Read received $200,000. MAME received $280,000 in ARPA funding. And there are a couple of others that are also supported. So we'll get that list to you so that you can have that information.
Now, if you do, with some creative discussions that Claudia and our office has had, and I assume she's had it with management as well, let me talk about how we can subsidize some of the increases related to DPS. Claudia has talked with John Kiefer, and I think they are confident that ARPA dollars, at least for 1 year, $4 million could be used to support some of the current, that $6 million request for current capital. Remember, every year we give them $6 million a year. $4 million of ARPA dollars could be used to pay for that, and you could use $4 million moved to operational dollars. Just think of it as ARPA dollars offsetting some of this increase without it being charged, without it having to be a charge to charter schools as well. So that's $4 million of ARPA instead of $4 million in property tax money, okay? And then, go ahead, Claudia.
No, and remember, I was targeting a total of $6 million.
Right.
And you're going to get to that, and I'm messing them up.
No, that was $4 million, and then she was going to do an additional $1.5 million of ARPA to help support the additional $1.5 million request. So that would actually give schools $8 million of ARPA money for 1 year, or at least until they spend it, for current capital where they have $6 million right now, but with no additional cost to the county. Does that make sense? We're giving them $8 million of ARPA. We're moving $4 million because we're giving them $8 million ARPA. Correct. So they're getting full funding for current capital, more. They're asked for 7.5. We're available to give them $8 million. We'll move $4 million to current expense, which offsets, and we're going to get there, David, offsets the difference between the $12.95 million that the managers recommended and the $27 million. So if you do the difference between $13 million and $27, it's $14 million. It's really only about $10 million plus because we have $4 million offsetting. I know this sounds complicated, but you can actually...
We wouldn't have to raise taxes.
Wait, I'm not done yet. You would have to raise taxes, potentially, not as much. But it depends on how much you want to give schools over and above, and how much you want to give Hayti, and how much you want to give pre-K, and how much you want to give DTCC. All of these things add up. David has tried over here to give well, he's not tried. He's done a good job. At least we understand it. I don't know if we can translate it for you. David, can you scroll down and say the net effect, if you give the schools everything that they need and we move that, what's the bottom line number? It's a funding gap of about $8.55 million. That's if you gave them everything they requested, the $716 for DPS. That would be paid for with ARPA dollars and probably an ILA. That's an additional $1.5 million for current capital, figured out how we pay for it, plus all the additions for $8.8 million for teacher salary adjustment, the classified salary adjustment, plus the charter school changes to all of those numbers. That's a net $8.5 million more because we're using ARPA dollars. Think of the ARPA as offsetting at $4 million. So I needed almost 13 million. $4 million come from ARPA. I got to have 8.5. So go ahead.
The upshot of this creative approach, which I fully endorse, that there be an additional $4 million for current operating expenses.
Without using property tax money.
Right, without using, so there'd be an additional $4 million towards, let's just say, the 8.8 is the classified. So let's just say we were working to achieve that 8.8. $4 million could go towards that, and there'd still be a gap there.
And then you still need another $8.55 million of county funding from somewhere, which is probably...
To meet the full request.
To meet the full request,
but
correct.
Can I just interject? First of all, I thought that we had $5.1 million of ARPA that we could use.
So, yeah, we do. And so what we're saying is, and I need to go back, I think we're saying the same thing. So the $4 million that's allocated plus the 1.5, and I'm suggesting that we go ahead and round that out to $8 million, okay? So I'm confused my own self.
You said there was $6.1 million.
Yeah, there's
and we're using $6 million.
Yeah, because there was another $500,000 that we are making available.
Okay, because I just want to say for me, I think we're making it a little complicated that we should get clarity on what people want to fund. Like for me, the classified, the manager already said in her budget that she was going to support the ongoing expense, the master's pay, and the classified increase, okay?
No, 8.8?
No, I'm not sorry, not certified.
The teacher supplement,
sorry,
teacher
the certified
supplement, master's
supplement.
pay.
I'm not sure 13 covers all of that. I'd like to see that it does.
Okay, so let's make sure that the 13 covered that, and whether then I guess they're whatever the charter school is. The thing that I think we need to get clarity on, Keith, is that extra salary supplement that the school board added, the 1.39. I don't know if we can afford to do that this year, honestly, because when you add that along with the charters, that's an additional, I mean, that I don't know is possible this year, whether that's something we have to look at doing next year.
Anything you reduce
Yeah.
out of their potential,
Yeah,
and
I
we'll
mean,
go back to it, lowers the amount.
Yeah, I personally, that was something that got added at the last minute. I don't know if we can afford to do that when we look at everything else, realistically, because that's 1.4 plus another 3, so that's 1.7 more. And we haven't even talked about our benefits for our staff and all these other things. Yeah. So I just think that like I'm saying, for me, it's the things that the manager already said, plus the classified staff, and then pulling out the pre-K stuff. And I don't know, if we can get that done, that's a lot.
Well, and the capital now.
And the capital. Yeah. If we can get that done, that is almost everything. And we haven't even talked about the needs of any of our own staff and departments. So I don't want to get too deep into this when we haven't had, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, so in other words, delete all the other stuff.
Ma'am?
In other words, delete all the other stuff.
Leave everything but take one. I hear from Commissioner Jacobs a proposal to take out the late add of 1 point. That was shown at the last quarterly retreat, and that's the only time it's been shown, but it's the Board of Education's approved budget request. I'm hearing Commissioner Jacobs propose not funding the $1.39 million and the concomitant $278,000 20% charter school charge that would go along with it. So it's roughly $1.6 million that you could take out of how much you're deciding. You could all agree,
we could always add it back in, but we haven't even talked about our own staff yet.
I think Wendy's saying it's lower on the priority list. I mean, you don't have to delete it forever so that we never see it again in our consciousness. Right.
Yeah.
This is helpful. We will push this off.
Because I will say, though, about that, this category of funding request, it's like the classified and the certified. They've all been coming forward every year, as a request. It's just they've staggered it. We haven't done it all. I mean, this is EC funding that, for exceptional children's teachers that, we've been reading about the need for additional funding there for as long as I can remember. But it's very difficult work and it's very competitive to fill the positions and they're losing people. This isn't the first year we've heard it. But I hear you. If we're trying to prioritize, that might need to be lower on the list. I'm willing to consider that. I'm willing to give you that makes sense. I'm not saying which way I would vote on that yet because I'm not ready to cherry pick.
Well, I agree with you.
Yeah.
But we just don't have all the information right now to know what we can or cannot do. Right. And I'm just saying, for me, I think we need to. We've heard loud and clear about the 8.8.
Yes, absolutely, for the 8.8, absolutely.
Can I? Yes, go ahead.
Question about the charter school. So each time we give an amount, we have to add another 20%?
If it's
For the charter
expense fund.
school,
Yes, ma'am.
if it goes to the DPS, we have to add 20%.
We don't have to. We do this because we're not punishing Durham Public Schools.
They all have to give it to you.
Every time we give money to Durham Public Schools for the current expense line item that we have budgeted, there's roughly 20% of our students, public school students, go to charter schools, and every dollar per pupil that we add to, 20% of that has to go to charter schools. So every time you add a dollar to the Durham Public School current expense line item, basically 20 cents of that dollar has to go to charter schools. That effectively takes 20 cents away from DPS, but the board over the last number of years has chosen to upcharge itself 20 cents so it's not as much punishment to DPS. So now DPS gets $1.20 and 22 cents goes to charter schools.
And we don't have to do that with the capital funding?
No, ma'am.
We don't have to add 20%?
No, ma'am.
Yeah.
Or the pre-K, depending on where we locate it and how we deal with that, which is what Claudia is talking about, doing some things, and ILAs and outside of that current expense, which is correct because it's mostly for direct kindergarten through 12th grade.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing and we sent a response on this, to remember this is a one-time solution. And so we will have to carry this over into the next fiscal year. I will say for the pre-K, we would recommend that the set aside that we have in the ARPA funding, that we go ahead and do that interlocal for both fiscal years. There's $1.4 million that we've allocated for that. And so if the board so chooses to do it, that we handle it that way.
We can do, now that's for the pre-K, but you also
Yes, ma'am.
had, was it 4 million that we had that could cover?
Current capital, that is a whole. It will cover 24, 25. When that ARPA funding runs out, which it will in 25, 26, you're going to be staring at needing to apply 4 million more county dollars just to get the current capital back to 6, or more than 4 million to go above that to 8 or 7, whatever the number is.
And I would also like to add that in our communication to the board, we noted that we'd also, as the manager shared, like to get with DPS to identify what are those most pressing capital project issues, so that if it's appropriate, we could bundle them, as we've done in the past, into a project that's, potentially funded with LOBs. Again, we've done this over the years. They do get bond funding, but we've also offset it. We have at least 150 some. We have quite a bit of LOBs funded.
We've done a lot, fairly recently in the past few years.
So that's the companion piece to this.
So just tell me one more time, just to be clear, the compensation and the charter amount is, we have funding available in what capacity to fund that?
The Durham's DPS compensation study for classified employees is $8.88 million. That $8.88 million, if you multiply it by 20%, which is the charter school surcharge, is another 1.77. You add those two numbers up together, and let's call it $10.6 million. It's effectively the cost for the classified study implementation. We do not have any other funding source other than property tax to pay for that. We are offsetting $4 million potentially of that cost by all these movements of ARPA dollars to pay for current capital, moving the current capital to current expense to offset $10.6 million, $4 million of that $10.6 million. But depending what else you add, it remains to be seen. I know it's a little complicated, but just know that there's $4 million that's sort of subsidizing the additional ads. You all need to decide. Commissioner Jacobs has proposed the 1.39 as being lower on her totem pole. To your point, what is not up here is any changes to the benefits plan. Right. Let me remind you that we are subsidizing that plan by roughly $1.7 million with the proposal as it now stands for employee buy-in or buy-up, and retirees for that matter.
Right. The cost increase was greater, and we're subsidizing some, and we're asking the employees to take on some of the cost increases.
We are subsidizing significantly more than $1.7 million. I'm just saying that's the maximum amount. If you all said this has got us concerned, whatever, if we wanted to scrap that and just go back to the county paying for it, it would be an additional 1.7. You can do something from 0 to that, or you can say we're good with what the managers. But if you said scrap it, that would be an additional 1.7 million that we would have to find.
And that discussion's tomorrow, where we're going to learn some more details about the benefits and whether or not we have concerns that.
Let's not do that today.
No, I know it's not today. I was like, is that tomorrow is what I was asking. Is that the presentation for tomorrow? Or?
Well, there was a lot of responses that were sent to the board.
Yes.
And we were hopeful that information would help satisfy the outstanding questions.
Okay.
I know we talked about potentially looking at subsidy amounts for positions at certain levels and what that break-even number is. This benefit conversation is complex.
We'll have to read some more on. We'll have to read all the detailed information you've sent us. I've scanned it, but I haven't digested it.
There are different costs depending on whether you buy the buy-up plan or not, whether it's a family
I know,
buy-up
it's incredibly
versus a
complex.
spouse versus it's a children program.
It'll make your head swim forever and ever.
And the information I think that HR provided really was the worst case scenario.
That's correct.
So if everyone selected the buy-up plan.
Buy-up family plan.
The buy-up family plan.
Then it showed
That's
that you
exactly
had to have a break-even salary of $80,000 a year. And if I'm doing my math and by memory, I think that's like 1,400 employees out of 2,000 make less than that.
Yeah.
But that, to your point, Dr. Sewell, was the worst-case scenario. If it's just an employee and a spouse, it's a different break-even point. But that all has ramifications depending on the choices you make there.
Wendy?
Yeah, I am still concerned about the possible implications of the, because even employees who, for instance, I know some of our lower paid employees, even with the COLA, when they do the buy-up plan, it's actually amounting to a salary cut.
Correct.
So I would like to know what the options are for addressing those particular employees. What would that look like if it was a certain fund that they could apply to, or, I don't know, whatever different scenarios that you all recommend. But I am concerned about that, especially when we're making these very intentional decisions to increase the salaries of our Durham Public School workers. I don't want to do it on the backs of our Durham County staff. I don't think that's a good dynamic to create. So
I want to scroll down, David, if you will, to the end result and tell you at this point, we're looking at roughly a tax rate increase of 4.9 cents. Remember that the manager recommended 3.25. And I think, David, if we added everything, I thought
it was closer. I took out just for this example, I took out the 1.39 million plus the charter is why it's less than what you
Okay,
thought.
thank you.
Yeah.
So if you had included everything for schools, we had set it up with an appropriation of additional $1.4 million of fund balance from the general fund, 5.25. If you take out, and David already has, as an example, the 1.39 million lower priority for Commissioner Jacob plus the charter, you're still at almost a 5-cent tax rate increase.
Yeah.
How could you lower that? Not do anything for employees for benefits plan. Do less for schools. Not give pre-K as much. Not give DTCC as much. Figure out what you're going to do with Hayti Reborn that's less than $2 million. This does include $2 million for Hayti.
$2 million for Hayti. Yeah,
Make it $1 million and watch the magic happen. $550 from Hayti.
Yeah, I personally support $1 million for Hayti. That's the same that the city's doing.
1,450, David.
They've already subtracted that out, and the manager, have you seen their budget? I know that they've switched a lot of the staff to the city. So where are they now? Do you know?
So what they did present was like a $1.4 million reduced budget.
And that's what we just put in there at 1.45, along with everything else, equals, scroll down, David, 4.83 cents. We can round that a little bit. But what if you give $1.7 million back for benefits plan? If we just say, let's hold off a year, let's regroup, let's figure out a long-term solution, David, add 1.7 million. You can see the number move in real time.
This is not doable. It's not doable.
We can also, I know that some commissioners asked about general fund balance. You can talk with Claudia about that. She's had some updates. We have this would be an additional 1.4.
Yeah. And the thing that we discussed, again, she really helped me sleep last night, but what we want to make sure we don't do is go so far outside of our fund balance policy that when we go to the local government commission to request approval for lobs and bonds, that they look upon us unfavorably.
Yeah.
So we have to protect the fiscal health in our fund balance.
Take the 1.7 back out. Just that includes 1.7 as if I just had him. I'm just telling you, in real time tomorrow, we'll make some of these decisions and show you. This is where we are right now. If you don't do any changes to the benefits plan fund at all, you fund everything for DPS except the 1.39 million, and you go to Hayti at 1.45 million. So 4.83 cents. We could probably go to round it to 4.8 by appropriating a little bit more fund balance.
Yeah, I mean, again, my personal opinion about Hayti is they're going to get $2 million from the city and the county, which is what they had last year, was their $2 million budget. They're just going to get half of it now from the city. And when we are cutting, again, when we're having a cut for benefits for our own staff, we just don't have the money. And most of that funding went for $1.4 million in staff and salaries. I just can't justify it with the kind of challenges that we're looking at here.
Well, Wendy, you know that standing up an organization, it takes more money to stand it up. They've already cut and passed over to the city a lot of the employees now. And meeting with the mayor last night, he's not sure it's going to go through their budget. So it's been proposed, and he's not sure what's going to happen with that. So we started this organization, and it makes no sense to start working with our young people and getting them to Durham Tech and then cut their legs out from under them. That would just be so bad for us to do that. I mean, 2 years at least, we can do what we need to do to keep this organization going. And it's not that much money compared to what we're doing with in other places.
I actually thought they had only come to us for one-time funding. I was really surprised that they were asking for another $2 million. So I feel like we give them $500,000. We're giving them a lot based on the fact that most of their money was spent on salaries and not on services. There was a lot about their presentation I was uncomfortable with. And, it was like I said that day. I do approve of their model and their goals. I think we all do. It does feel like the return on the investment is low. It was low this year. The number of students served per dollar given, it was like $50,000 a person. We can't afford that, I don't think.
So tell me of another organization that has created the kind of results for our young people that would be out there in the street creating habit or being killed that this organization is doing. Tell me one.
Well, there weren't that many.
Doing it.
Even this wasn't that many. There weren't that many humans that were, actually served. That's the problem.
They've had how many graduations now?
Actually, their fourth one, I think, is this week.
They've had 4 graduations.
They had, literally, it was 40 people. 40 people had graduated and had been, referred for a position, some sort of a position, a job, had been provided, I don't know. Anyway,
and how did they just start it?
Comes to $50,000 a person.
They haven't even been in operation for a year. It's been like 6 months or so.
I know, but I thought they were going to be getting funding from outside sources, not dependent just on the county. I mean, I'm saying $500,000. That feels really generous.
So we've heard $500,000, $1 million, $1.4 million. So let's just keep that in mind.
And I'd meet in the middle, perhaps.
You meet in the middle, okay.
Sure.
So the middle is,
I wouldn't go down lower than $1 million.
Okay.
We can work through that. What I want you to say right now is the ground level is a 4.83 cent tax rate increase total. That's 1.58 cents higher than what the manager recommended to do. And I'm going to say it one more time just so we're getting it locked in our heads, and we'll work on it tomorrow as you horse trade a little bit. Everything for schools except The 1.39 million plus the charter schools for that was taken out of this number. This does include $1 million more for pre-K funding direct to CCSA. This includes an additional $500,000, roughly 504, for DTCC. And that's it. It doesn't do anything for the benefits plan. But that's where we are today, right now, just as you getting used to it. We will have to seriously work on this tomorrow afternoon. So drink some coffee, take a Red Bull, whatever it is you do to be present and ready to finalize this and get a tax rate increase that will become part of the budget ordinance that you will approve on June 10th, if that's the date you want to approve the budget.
And this is, remember, the city's already doing 3.85. So, again, this is really hard because we have never had a tax increase like this in the history of Durham.
And Commissioner Jacobs, I'll remind you, on one of those mini response to questions, you had asked verbally, I believe it was you,
Yes.
for a detail of the city and county rates over the last 20 years, thanks to Jonathan on our staff.
Yes.
He put a table together. It's at the back of one of those documents.
It was very interesting.
But I'll call attention to that.
And we are higher than we've ever been. This would be higher.
But only for a year.
Substantially higher.
When KR and the tax office implement a revaluation, the tax rate will drop. That does not mean tax valuations versus the tax bill for many residents will not drop, even at a revenue neutral rate, but the tax rate will drop. I will remind you that some of the choices you're making as part of this tax rate increase will put us in the hole to start with next year. The $4 million of ARPA funding to limit the tax rate increase this year is going to be there next year. I dare say once we talk about the CIP a little bit, plus what I already know is coming with some of the 22 GO bonds, that we're going to need a tax rate increase for the CIP next year for debt-related payments. So there are pressures next year coming 25, 26, if you're concerned.
I have a question. Since this is kind of like bare bones, it doesn't include our staff. If we take the HATI down to $1 million, because again, we are in a crisis here, what does that do to the tax rate?
He'll put it in and show you.
I'd like to see that dynamic.
It goes down to about 1/10 of a cent. It's not.
That's not going to make a whole lot of difference.
For your mental math, every cent is basically $5 million. So if you take $1 million, you take a 20th of it, or so 2/10 of a cent away.
You basically reduced it by $450,000. If you add $1 million to fund balance appropriated, take that to $2 million, and you might get another 1/10 cent off. And
so that's the question. How much can we go to fund balance to get it down a little bit?
Right. Fund balance is there is no perfect answer to that. I know there is only how we end up this fiscal year. What next? Would you do this at home? Would you say, okay, I've maxed out the credit card to go on a trip, and I still really want to stay at some fancy hotel, so I'm going to go into my savings account for my kids' college education. I'm just going to do it once. Surely we'll pay it back. What if something happens and you can't pay it back? That's the only, and it's a what if. There is no pure answer.
The difference is it feels like we're taking money out of the kids' college account that they actually don't need, because there's plenty of money. It's ample, right, without it. That's what it feels like. I mean, my question would be, how much can we take out of fund balance and still be within our fiscal policy?
It's a moving number. Literally every day it's cash in
Well,
terms
today,
of revenue.
what is it? I don't know. Today, tomorrow, what? I guess tell me tomorrow afternoon.
Tomorrow. We'll have some scenarios tomorrow where we feel comfortable. We're still vetting and scrubbing a lot. For sales taxes are still not where they were last year, but there are places when we look at, for instance, encumbrances, and this is where I felt comfortable in that some encumbrances, our philosophy of strategy has been a little bit more generous in the purchase orders we carry over because of supply chain issues. And so we'll see that number go down this year compared to prior years. So there are some places there when we project out where do we think we'll land. It has been a while.
We had 3 fabulous years of
fabulous.
revenue growth, and we all had a wonderful time choosing where to apply those dollars. And it's just simply tightened up. We're still growing, just slower revenue, but we have many, many expenditure choices that we want to fund.
To tell
Yeah.
the story of
If I-
rising things above.
Commissioner Carter, if I may, you're asking a great question. What is the amount? The problem is, if we could come up with that amount and give you that today, tomorrow, or the next day, we would. The problem is, fund balance isn't settled until the ACFR is settled. The ACFR isn't going to be settled until September, October, November. So when they say it's a moving target, it is so much, there's so many other moving pieces to it. Is there a number that's more comfortable? Honestly, we reduced it this year because of our lack of comfort in looking at projections for the end of this year. So is there a difference between $1 million or $2 million? I'm not.
We'll do that.
The range is
we'll
that's what I was about to say. Can we work on a range? I think Claudia could come up with that.
We'll go back and do. And it would help if you all, because there are a lot of decisions to be made, what are your highest priorities? So if you can tell us that, and we can get to a number that we can find, then we'll be better able to come back and say, here's what we would propose in funding this. Yes.
I just want to thank you guys. I just really want to thank you for the being willing to look at creative approaches. Everyone, John and Claudia, Keith, the manager, everyone who's been trying to problem solve around this to try to really address the needs of our schools. I really appreciate that everyone, we're on the same team.
We are.
We are. and it
We
feels
are on the
that
same
way.
team.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. And even consider, it's not that we have to do this, but if there are things that you all want to fund, but we feel like we shouldn't do it right now, would you trust us that as we're moving to 24, 25, that we would be looking for ways to fund it, even if it's not in the adopted budget? Trust us that we would be looking for ways, as we settle with the fund balance, looking for ways to fund something that was important to you that we didn't get in the adopted budget, but we would be looking for where could we find available funds once we're in that year to cover that. It depends. That's fair, but that's another conversation that we've had that could help us. Okay.
I agree. I wanted to say the same thing Wendy said. I mean, I truly feel like, we come to this with our own thoughts about what are our priorities. You all, our valued, loyal advisors, we hear your caution, but you're not dug in with your caution, right? You are willing to roll with us, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that we feel heard. It's good to feel heard, and we hear you. I hope you feel heard. I hope you feel like we listened to your cautionary words of wisdom. Yeah. Is there anything else for the order of the day? I don't think so. If not, we're adjourned.
Yep. Good discussion.